My name is Hazel Cooper. I'm 35 years old, and for the longest time, I genuinely believed that if you loved someone hard enough, patiently enough, consistently enough, eventually they would stop trying to hurt you just to see if you'd stay. Turns out, that's not how love works. Or maybe more accurately, that's not how healthy love works. Brandon Hale was 31 when everything finally collapsed between us. We'd been together a little over 2 years. We'd been talking about wedding venues, guest lists, honeymoon destinations we couldn't afford yet but bookmarked anyway like they were promises waiting to happen. 5 months earlier, he moved into my townhouse on the edge of Tampa. The lease stayed in my name because I'd already been living there long before we started dating, and honestly, my career made me obsessive about paperwork and stability. I work IT operations for a hospital network. Midnight server failures, emergency response systems, on-call rotations, chaos at impossible hours. My entire job revolves around remaining calm while everything around me breaks. Brandon used to say that was what he loved most about me. "You never panic," he'd whisper sometimes while laying beside me at night. "You make everything feel safe." Back then, hearing that made me feel proud. Later, it started feeling like a responsibility I could never put down. Brandon worked in marketing for a luxury real estate agency. He was charming in that dangerous, effortless way some people are. He could walk into a room and somehow make everyone feel like they'd known him forever. When we first met, his confidence felt intoxicating. Like sunlight. Like warmth after years of exhaustion. But somewhere along the line, confidence slowly transformed into performance. Then, performance became control. And I didn't notice it happening until I was already exhausted all the time. At first, it was small things. If I took too long replying to a text during work, Brandon would say I was emotionally distant. If I needed an hour alone after a 14-hour shift, he'd accuse me of punishing him. If I checked whether he got home safely after a late dinner with friends, he'd roll his eyes and call me controlling. Then 20 minutes later, he'd post some passive-aggressive relationship quote on Instagram about the bare minimum. The confusing part was that Brandon could also be incredibly loving. That's what made everything so difficult to explain. One night, he'd be accusing me of not caring enough because I sounded tired on the phone. The next morning, he'd kiss my forehead while making pancakes and tell me I was the best thing that ever happened to him. So I kept convincing myself the good version of him was the real one. I kept trying harder. I am not perfect. When I'm stressed, I get quiet. I retreat into problem-solving mode because that's literally how my brain is wired from years working crisis response systems. But I loved that man steadily. I brought him coffee before his early meetings. I remembered tiny details from stories he told months earlier. I bought him stupid little gifts when something reminded me of him. I sat through endless office gossip stories like they were prestige television because I knew they mattered to him. I loved him in calm ways. Consistent ways. And Brandon never seemed to trust consistency unless it came with desperation attached. The night everything ended was a Thursday, 8:17 p.m. I remember the exact time because the incident report was still open on my monitor when my phone buzzed beside my keyboard. There'd been a server outage affecting patient scheduling systems across multiple clinics, and my entire department had been drowning for hours. I had already texted Brandon twice earlier that evening. 6:30 p.m. Running late. I'll call when I'm heading home. Then again at 7:45. Still dealing with the outage. You okay? That was it. 2 normal texts. No argument. No tension. Nothing unusual. So when my phone vibrated again, I expected something ordinary. Maybe asking me to grab wine on the way home. Instead, I looked down and saw, "Stop loving me like you do, or we're done." I stared at the message for almost 10 seconds. Not because I didn't understand the words, because I understood them too clearly. Love. The thing you are supposedly safest offering another person. And somehow he was using it like a weapon. Like punishment. Like leverage. I remember feeling something inside me go strangely still. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just stillness. Like the exact moment a storm finally passes and leaves wreckage behind so quiet it almost feels peaceful. I typed one sentence. Then we're done. Sent it. Turned my phone face down. And went back to finishing the incident report. That sounds cold when I say it now. But honestly, I think I was just tired. Tired in a way sleep could never fix. By the time I walked into the parking garage later that night, I had 12 missed calls from Brandon, 3 voicemails, 6 texts. Hazel, please answer. Baby, I was joking. Don't be dramatic. I love you. Please call me. That's the thing about cruel jokes. They stop being jokes the second someone accepts them at face value. I didn't call him back. I drove home in silence. His car wasn't in the driveway. Earlier, he'd mentioned grabbing drinks with coworkers after work, so the townhouse was empty when I walked inside. Quiet. Still. Peaceful in a way I hadn't realized I missed. I stood there for almost a full minute, with my purse still hanging from my shoulder. Then I turned on every light in the house and started packing his things. Not angrily. That's important. I wasn't slamming drawers or throwing shirts. I folded everything carefully. Methodically. Like someone finally accepting reality after years of negotiating with it. Closet first. His side was overflowing with expensive jackets, button-downs, shoes lined perfectly along the wall. I grabbed 2 large duffel bags in the hard-shell suitcase he brought the day he moved in. Folded everything neatly. Bathroom next. His cologne bottles. His skincare products. His electric razor charging beside my sink, like he permanently belonged there. I wrapped the glass bottles carefully in hand towels before placing them into a storage bin. Kitchen after that. His favorite coffee mugs. The ridiculous air fryer he insisted would change our lives. The decorative tray near the entrance holding his sunglasses, keys, and random receipts. Then the living room. The throw blankets he bought because he said my couch looked emotionally unavailable. The framed print he hung in the hallway without asking. Home. Big black letters across white canvas. I stared at it for a second before quietly flipping it face down against the wall. By 10:30 p.m., every single thing Brandon owned sat stacked neatly beside the front door. Like luggage waiting for departure. I left a note on the kitchen island. Brandon, you set the terms. I accepted them. Your belongings are packed. Text me to arrange pickup. Please don't come late at night. Hazel. Then I did all the boring practical things that save your future self later. Changed the smart lock code. Changed the garage keypad. Removed him from shared streaming accounts. Transferred our joint wedding savings into my personal account temporarily so nothing messy could happen emotionally at 2 a.m. Then I opened a spreadsheet. Because apparently trauma turns me into an accountant. I carefully calculated every contribution Brandon made toward the wedding fund. $1,120 total. I planned to send it back once he collected his things. Not because I wanted to hurt him. Because I wanted everything clean. Final. At 11:12 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Hazel, please, I love you. And that was the moment something inside me finally cracked emotionally. Not because the message softened me. Because I realized how casually he could weaponize love whenever it suited him. An hour earlier, love was apparently something wrong with me. Now suddenly it was sacred again because he was losing control of the situation. I replied once. Pick up Saturday at 2 p.m. Bring your sister if you want. Please don't contact me until then. Then I turned my phone onto Do Not Disturb. Laid down in bed, alone. And for the first time in months, my chest didn't feel tight. 4 days later, Saturday at 2 p.m. came and went. Brandon did not show up. At 1:52, he texted, I can't believe you're really doing this. At 2:07, I'm not coming if you're going to act cold. At 2:19, my friends think this is emotional abuse. I didn't respond. By 3:11, the flying monkeys arrived. A woman named Kay texted me from a number I didn't recognize. Hey Hazel, I know Brandon's hurting. Can we all talk? You're taking this too literally. Too literally. As if words weren't the entire point of sending a message. I replied, He said we were done. I agreed. That is not abuse. That is acceptance. Please don't contact me again. Kay didn't reply. But 10 minutes later, I was added to a group chat named Hazel is Cold. 5 women were in it. 2 I had met once at brunch. Messages started flying immediately. You can't just throw your boyfriend out. Women like you are why men don't open up. If you loved him, you'd fight for him. If one text can end everything, maybe you never loved him. I sent one screenshot. Brandon's exact message. Stop loving me like you do, or we're done. Then I left the chat and blocked every number. That night, Brandon tried a new tactic. At 9:40 p.m., my doorbell camera alerted me. He was standing on my front porch. Hair perfect. Shirt neatly pressed. Holding a grocery bag like he was casually stopping by to cook dinner. Like nothing had happened. Like he could simply step back into the life he had threatened to end. He tried the old key. It didn't work. He looked down at the handle. Then up at the camera. Then he smiled. Not warmly. Performatively. Like he knew he was being watched and wanted to look harmless. Hazel, he mouthed. I didn't open the door. I didn't speak through the camera. I watched the footage from my couch, with my heart hammering against my ribs. He texted, "Did you change the locks?" I replied, "You moved out. Pickup is Wednesday at 6 p.m. Bring Vanessa. I'll be home." 5 minutes later, "That's illegal. I have rights." I answered, "Lease is in my name. I'm not debating. Wednesday." Then I called a locksmith anyway. Because "I have rights" is the kind of phrase people use right before doing something dramatic. On Monday, the locksmith came. New deadbolt. New keypad. Fresh code. $210. I saved the receipt and added it to the spreadsheet like it was just another bill. Brandon's next move was money. He sent me a Cash App request for $2,800 labeled "Rent plus time." Time. Like love was hourly. Like emotional exhaustion came with an invoice. I declined it and wrote, "I'm refunding your $1,120 wedding savings contribution when you pick up your belongings." That was it. He called me 37 times in 1 hour. Left 3 voicemails. The first one was sobbing. "I didn't mean it, Hazel. I was scared. Please, you know how I get." The second was pure rage. "You're humiliating me. You're making me look insane. You're disgusting for doing this." The third was sweet again. Soft voice. Almost tender. "Please just talk to me. You're my person." That phrase used to melt something in me. You're my person. Now it felt like a collar being clipped around my throat. Wednesday finally came. Brandon arrived at 6:04 p.m. with his older sister, Vanessa. Vanessa had always been polite to me, though never particularly warm. That night, she wouldn't meet my eyes. Brandon walked into the townhouse like he still lived there. Like my living room was a stage, and he had returned for the final act. His eyes moved over the packed bags beside the door. "So this is really happening," he said. I kept my voice calm. "Yes." He tried stepping closer. I stepped back. Not dramatically. Just enough to make the boundary visible. Vanessa whispered, "Bran, come on. Let's just get your things." He shot her a look like she had betrayed him. Then he turned back to me and softened his face. That was always the hardest version of Brandon to resist. Not the angry one. Not the dramatic one. The wounded one. "Hazel," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. I had a bad day. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. You know I love you." I nodded. "I believe you were stressed." His face brightened for half a second. Then I finished. "I also believe you meant it enough to send it." The brightness disappeared. He stared at me like consequences were a foreign language. "You're really going to throw away 2 years over one sentence?" "No," I said. "You threw it into the room. I just stopped carrying it." His mouth tightened. Vanessa looked down. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Brandon laughed once, sharp and bitter. You're going to regret losing me. Maybe once, those words would have hooked into me. Maybe once, I would have rushed to reassure him. But that night, I only felt tired. Maybe, I said. But I won't regret choosing peace. They carried the bags out slowly. Every trip to the car felt like watching a life dismantle, one object at a time. His shoes. His jackets. His cologne. The air fryer. The framed photograph of us from a beach weekend in Clearwater, still smiling inside the bag, like we hadn't already become strangers. When they left, the house became quiet again. But this time, quiet didn't feel empty. It felt clean. That night, I sent Brandon the $1,120 with a note. This matches your contributions. Take care. At 11:58 p.m., he requested it back with the message, I don't want money. I want you. I ignored it. For 9 days, there was silence. Then, Brandon escalated. It started at work. My hospital admin building is secured. Badge access. Camera logs. Reception desk. The kind of place where unexpected emotional ambushes are not romantic. At 10:15 a.m., the receptionist called my extension. There's a man here asking for you, she said carefully. He says he's your boyfriend, and he needs to talk. Boyfriend. Not example. Not former boyfriend. Boyfriend. My stomach dropped, but my voice stayed steady. Tell him I'm unavailable. If he won't leave, call security. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. I just want closure. Don't make this ugly. Closure. The word people use when they want one last chance to control the ending. Security escorted him out. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He smiled politely at the guard, like he was the victim of a misunderstanding. That afternoon, one of his coworkers messaged me on LinkedIn. Her name was Lila. Profile photo in front of a marina. Hey Hazel, Brandon's really going through it. He says you blindsided him. Can you please just hear him out? I replied. He texted me that we were done. I agreed. I have screenshots. Please don't message me again. She didn't respond. 2 days later, Brandon tried the classic accidental run-in. Sunday morning, I went to the Riverwalk for a jog. That route had been mine for years. Headphones. Water bottle. Sunrise hitting the river just right. It was one of the few places where my brain could unclench. I turned a corner near the railing, and there he was, leaning casually against the metal barrier, wearing the gray hoodie I bought him last Christmas. Wow, he said, like we had bumped into each other at a grocery store. Fancy seeing you here. I stopped. Took out one earbud. Brandon, please don't do this. His face tightened. Do what? I'm allowed to exist in public. You're allowed, I said. You're also not subtle. He stepped closer. I miss you. I didn't answer. I hate how this ended, he continued. You know we love each other. There it was again. Love offered like bait. I looked at him and finally said the sentence I should have said months earlier. Love doesn't threaten. Love doesn't test. Love doesn't send messages designed to make someone beg. His eyes flashed. I told you I was joking. Then you joked about taking away the relationship, I said. That's not love. That's leverage. He reached for my arm. I stepped back. Calm. Firm. I'm seeing someone, I said. It was a lie. I don't even know why I said it. Maybe because every conversation with Brandon felt like a negotiation, and I needed something strong enough to end the meeting. The lie worked. His face changed instantly. Not sadness first. Possession. Like I had stolen something from him by refusing to remain available. You never loved me, he said. I put my earbud back in. That's not true, but it is over. Then I ran. The rest of the route, my heart pounded harder from adrenaline than exercise. Because I finally understood something. Brandon wasn't chasing love. He was chasing the feeling of being able to yank it away. That night, he posted a vague Instagram story. Some people only love you when it's convenient. Mutual friends messaged me. What happened? Are you okay? Brandon seems devastated. I didn't explain to everyone. I sent the screenshot of his original text to one friend I trusted and said, "This is what happened." Word travels faster than lies when you have receipts. Then he tried the nuclear option. My mother. My mom lives in Orlando. She is sweet, direct, and allergic to nonsense. Brandon called her crying. 5 minutes later, she texted me. Did Brandon just call me saying you abandoned him? I replied, I'll send screenshots. I sent everything. The original text. My response. The group chat. The Cash App request. The workplace ambush. Mom called me immediately. She didn't ask whether I was okay. She asked one question. Did you ever threaten him? No. Did you ever raise your voice? No. Did you ever tell him he couldn't leave? No. Then you're fine, she said, and he needs to stop. Then my mother did something I didn't expect. She called Brandon back. I don't know exactly what she said because she never bragged about it. She only told me afterward. I told him love is not a test, and if he contacts you again, I'm the one calling the police. Brandon didn't contact me for a week after that. In that week, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I went on a date. Not to prove a point. Not to make him jealous. Not because I was magically healed. Just because I wanted to remember what simple felt like. His name was Ethan Brooks. He was 33, a physical therapist, and we met through a coworker's game night. We got tacos. We talked about bad movies, childhood pets, and how neither of us understood pickleball but respected its cultural power. No threats. No tests. No scorekeeping. When I checked my phone after dinner, there were no missed calls accusing me of being distant. No emotional traps waiting in my messages. No sudden punishment for enjoying myself. Just quiet. Normal quiet. The kind of quiet I had forgotten existed. And for the first time in years, a date didn't feel like a performance review. It felt like breathing. 6 weeks after the breakup, Brandon made one final attempt. This time through email. Because by then, he had burned through enough blocked phone numbers to realize I wasn't reopening any doors. The subject line said, "Closure." Of course it did. The email was 4 long paragraphs of apologies, stitched together with blame so carefully that, at first glance, it almost sounded sincere. I didn't realize my words would hurt you that deeply. I was scared because I loved you so much. You always took things too literally. I just needed reassurance. That last sentence sat in my chest like a stone. Because reassurance had never actually been the issue. I reassured Brandon constantly. I reassured him with consistency. With patience. With loyalty. With showing up over and over and over again, even when I was emotionally exhausted. What he wanted was not reassurance. He wanted proof that he could hurt me and still keep me. Then came the twist at the end of the email. If you don't respond, I'll have to tell people my side of the story. My side. Like relationships were courtroom battles. Like love itself needed competing legal arguments. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Just deeply tired of the performance. I forwarded the email to my friend Avery, who works as a paralegal. Avery called me 10 minutes later. Do not respond emotionally, she said immediately. I wasn't planning to. Good. Save everything. If he keeps escalating, you can send a cease and desist. I leaned back in my office chair and rubbed my forehead. I hate that this even sounds necessary. I know, Avery said softly. But people who lose control sometimes panic when boundaries become real. That sentence stayed with me. People who lose control panic when boundaries become real. Because that was exactly what this had been from the beginning. Not heartbreak. Not confusion.
Panic.
Brandon panicked every single time he stopped feeling emotionally in charge. I ended up replying with one sentence. I wish you well. Please do not contact me again. Then I blocked his email too. 2 days later, his mother called me. I almost ignored it. But something in me said, answer. So I did. Hazel, she said quietly. Her voice sounded exhausted. Not manipulative. Not defensive. Just tired. Brandon is not doing well. I stayed silent. He says you left him over a joke. I closed my eyes briefly. With respect, I said carefully, it wasn't a joke to me. There was a pause. Then she asked softly, what exactly did he say? So I read the message out loud, word for word. Stop loving me like you do, or we're done. Silence. Long silence. Then I heard her whisper, oh my God. Not dramatic. Not performative. Genuine shock. I didn't gloat. I didn't pile on to her son. I simply said, I loved him. I truly did. But I can't stay in a relationship where love is used like a threat. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry, Hazel. Something about hearing a parent apologize for their child's behavior nearly broke my heart. Not because it fixed anything. Because it sounded honest. Then she said something that reframed the entire relationship for me. He's done this before. I frowned slightly. Not this exact thing, she clarified quickly, but testing people, pushing them emotionally, panicking when he feels insecure, then becoming angry if they don't chase him. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Because suddenly, so many moments from our relationship rearranged themselves into something clearer. Every fight that appeared out of nowhere. Every emotional withdrawal. Every accusation designed to make me prove myself again. He had not been searching for love. He had been searching for certainty through control. And the cruel part was that no amount of love could ever permanently satisfy that kind of fear. I think he's terrified of abandonment, his mother whispered. I looked out my office window toward the parking structure below. Maybe, I said quietly, but you can't prevent abandonment by emotionally cornering people. No, she agreed sadly. You can't. Before hanging up, she promised me something. I'll make sure he stops contacting you. For the first time since this entire nightmare started. I believed someone, and she kept that promise. After that phone call, the contact stopped completely. No more random numbers. No more social media posts. No more surprise appearances. No more coworkers suddenly messaging me on his behalf like emotional hostage negotiators. Nothing. Just silence. And the strangest part? The silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. The weeks afterward slowly became some of the healthiest weeks I'd had in years. At work, I got promoted to lead coordinator on a new hospital systems project. Not because I was extraordinary, but because I'm reliable under pressure. One of my supervisors actually said during the meeting, "You stabilize chaos without escalating it." The irony almost made me laugh. Because for 2 years, I had spent my personal life trying to stabilize chaos that never wanted peace in the first place. Meanwhile, Ethan and I kept seeing each other. Slowly. Intentionally. No rushing. No dramatic declarations. No emotional roller coasters disguised as passion. And honestly, at first, that scared me a little. I had gotten so used to anxiety feeling romantic that calmness almost felt unfamiliar. One Friday night, Ethan came over with takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat on my couch in sweatpants while rain tapped softly against the windows. At some point, he glanced over and said gently, "You still think about him sometimes, don't you?" Not accusing. Not threatened. Just observant. I nodded honestly. Yeah. Do you miss him? I thought about it carefully. I miss who I kept hoping he would become. Ethan absorbed that quietly. Then he asked, "What actually happened between you two?" So I told him everything. The texts. The manipulation. The fake closure attempts. The group chats. The workplace ambush. The emotional whiplash. All of it. I expected him to look uncomfortable by the end. Instead, Ethan let out one soft, disbelieving laugh. Not at me. at the absurdity of the situation itself. "So basically," he said, "he wanted you to prove your love by loving him less?" I stared at him, then slowly nodded. "Yeah," I admitted. "Pretty much." Ethan shook his head gently. "That's not love, Hazel." I smiled faintly. "I know that now." "No," he said softly. "I mean, really know it." And that was the moment I realized something important. For most of my relationship with Brandon, I had understood emotionally unhealthy behavior intellectually. But understanding something logically and truly believing you deserve better are completely different things. Brandon wanted romance that felt cinematic, intense, chaotic, constant reassurance wrapped inside emotional emergencies. But real love? Real love is usually quieter than that. It's checking in because you care, not because you're monitoring someone. It's saying, "I'm hurt," instead of threatening to leave. It's creating safety instead of confusion. It's not keeping score every time your partner fails an invisible test they never agreed to take. For 2 years, I kept shrinking myself emotionally, trying to keep Brandon calm. I thought patience would eventually heal his fear. I thought consistency would make him feel safe enough to stop testing me. Instead, every time I survived one test, another appeared. Because the point was never reassurance. The point was control. And the hardest truth of all? I really did love him. That's what made leaving so painful. People always assume relationships end because love disappears. Sometimes relationships end because love gets buried underneath manipulation until breathing becomes impossible. The night Brandon texted, "Stop loving me like you do, or we're done." I think part of him fully expected me to panic, to beg, to chase him emotionally, to prove myself again. Instead, I quietly agreed. Not because I stopped loving him, because for the first time in a very long time, I loved myself too. And once that happened, peace stopped feeling selfish. It started feeling necessary. My name is Bianca Russo. I'm 29 years old, and 6 months ago, I was supposed to marry the man I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. Instead, I canceled the wedding, invested the entire wedding fund into Bitcoin out of pure anger, ignored the screaming calls from his family, and watched everything unravel after the money started multiplying. Looking back now, I realized the breakup didn't actually begin with money. It began the moment Nathan decided love had a price tag attached to it. Nathan Cole was 31 when everything fell apart. We'd been together for 4 years and engaged for 1. For most of our relationship, our life felt calm in the kind of way people underestimate until they lose it. We cooked dinner together. We watched terrible reality shows. We argued over IKEA instructions and laughed 5 minutes later. We planned a future that felt steady. That word steady matters more to me now than it did back then. Because chaos can look exciting when you don't realize it's poison. Early in our engagement, we agreed on a wedding budget of $25,000. My parents contributed $10,000 as their gift. I saved the remaining $15,000 over several years by skipping vacations, taking extra freelance work, and living carefully. It wasn't going to be some luxury social media spectacle. Just a beautiful venue, good food, close friends, family, maybe 100 guests. A wedding. Not a performance. Nathan agreed to all of it at the time. We discussed it calmly, like adults. At least, I thought we had. Then, February happened. Nathan attended his ex-girlfriend Vanessa's wedding because they still shared mutual friends from college. I didn't go because I had work deadlines, and honestly, I didn't care enough to spend a weekend pretending to enjoy small talk with people I barely knew. Nathan came home that night different. Not drunk, not angry. Worse. Restless. He walked into the apartment, still wearing his suit jacket, loosened tie hanging around his neck, staring at our living room like it suddenly offended him. I was sitting on the floor building a bookshelf with an Allen wrench in my hand when he sighed heavily. "We need to talk about the wedding," he said. I kept tightening a screw. That sentence never leads anywhere good. "I'm serious, Bianca." Something in his tone made me look up. "What happened?" He dropped onto the couch and rubbed his face slowly. Vanessa's wedding was incredible. There was something strange about the way he said her name. Not romantic exactly. Competitive. I shrugged. okay? The flowers alone cost almost $8,000. I blinked. That's insane. That's normal now, he replied immediately. No, it isn't. He leaned forward. You didn't see it. The venue, the lighting, the champagne wall, the live orchestra. Bianca, people are going to compare our wedding to that. People who? Everyone. I laughed a little because I genuinely thought he was joking. Nathan didn't laugh back. My coworkers, he continued. My friends. Your family. People notice these things. My family notices whether we're happy, I said carefully. Not centerpieces. He rolled his eyes in a way I had never seen before. That's because your family doesn't understand class. The word landed hard. Class. Like our relationship had suddenly become some kind of luxury brand evaluation. I stared at him for a second. Excuse me? He stood and started pacing slowly around the apartment. I've been thinking, he said, and honestly, I think we need to double the budget. I actually stopped moving. The Allen wrench slipped from my fingers onto the hardwood floor with a sharp, metallic clink. Double? He nodded. Minimum. To $50,000? Yes. I laughed once in disbelief. Where exactly do you think that money is coming from? You could take out a loan. I stared at him. He continued before I could even answer. Or ask your older sister for help. Elena and her husband just bought that huge house. My sister worked 80-hour weeks for years to afford that house. So? The way he said it chilled me. Not ashamed, not embarrassed. Entitled. Like other people's sacrifices existed for his convenience. Nathan, I said slowly, we agreed on 25. That was before I realized what weddings actually cost. No, I replied quietly. That was before you decided appearances mattered more than reality. His jaw tightened immediately. You know what? He snapped. Sometimes I think you just don't understand what it means to want something beautiful. I want something real. That's easy to say when you're comfortable looking cheap. There it was. The first real crack. I stood slowly from the floor. Cheap? You know what I mean. No, I said. Explain it to me. He exhaled dramatically, like I was exhausting him. I'm saying I don't want people thinking I settled. That one hurt more than I expected. Not because it was cruel. Because part of me realized he meant it. I felt something cold settle in my chest. The room suddenly felt smaller. You think a wedding budget determines your value? No, he replied instantly, but effort does. I crossed my arms tightly. I spent 3 years saving for this wedding. That's not enough anymore. The arrogance in his voice barely sounded like the man I'd loved for 4 years. I looked at him carefully then, really looked at him. And suddenly I saw it. Not excitement, not stress, shame. Nathan wasn't excited about marriage anymore. He was terrified of looking ordinary. Listen, he said, softening his voice slightly. Vanessa's husband invested in their future. He wanted her to feel special. And I don't? That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. He rubbed his forehead impatiently. Bianca, why are you making this difficult? That question almost made me laugh. Because manipulative people always ask why you're making things difficult right after they move the goalposts. The budget stays at 25, I said firmly. Nathan went completely still. Then he placed both hands on his hips and delivered the sentence that destroyed our relationship. Then the wedding is off until you can afford to give me what I deserve. Silence filled the apartment. I remember hearing traffic outside, a dog barking somewhere downstairs, the faint hum of our refrigerator. Tiny, meaningless sounds burned into my memory because my brain understood something important before my heart did. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a threat. He expected me to panic, to negotiate, to beg him not to leave. Instead, I felt strangely calm. I looked directly at him. You're right, I said softly. It's off. His expression collapsed instantly. What? You said the wedding is off unless I double the budget. I'm not doing that. His eyes widened. Bianca, don't be dramatic. I'm agreeing with you. That's not what I meant. Then say what you meant. He opened his mouth, closed it again. For the first time in our entire relationship, Nathan looked unsure of himself. He stepped toward me. Come on, we're emotional right now. No, I said quietly. You're disappointed your ultimatum didn't work. His face hardened immediately. Then came the tears. But they weren't sad tears. They were furious tears. You're really throwing away 4 years over money? Apparently, he still didn't hear himself. I shook my head slowly. No, Nathan, you already did that. He grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the door. Before leaving, he turned around one last time. You're going to regret this. The door slammed hard enough to shake the wall art. I stood alone in the apartment for a long time afterward. I expected to cry. Instead, I just felt numb. Like my body understood survival before my emotions caught up. About 40 minutes later, my phone exploded. Gloria called first. Then Tiffany. Then Vanessa. Then numbers I didn't even recognize. I answered Gloria once. What did you do to my son? She demanded immediately. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because somehow, I was already the villain. Nathan ended the engagement, I replied calmly. You forced him into this. No, I said. I refuse to be manipulated. You embarrassed him. There it was again.
Embarrassment. Status.
Appearances. Everything suddenly made sense. Nathan hadn't changed overnight. He came from people who taught him love was transactional. I hung up. Tiffany immediately texted me. Are you seriously canceling a wedding over money? Vanessa sent, Nathan deserves someone who believes in him. That one almost made me respond. Instead, I turned my phone completely off. Then I did something impulsive. Something angry. Something reckless enough that even now I still laugh nervously remembering it. I opened my laptop, logged into my Coinbase account, and bought $25,000 worth of Bitcoin. Every cent of the wedding fund. Was it petty? Absolutely. But part of me also knew something important. That money was no longer safe sitting untouched while Nathan and his family viewed it as negotiable leverage. Bitcoin was sitting around $28,000 at the time. My best friend Mason called after hearing what happened from mutual friends. You invested the entire wedding fund into crypto? He asked in disbelief. Yes. Bianca, that's either genius or emotional damage. Probably both. You realize it could crash tomorrow. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the dark apartment around me. Still cheaper than marrying the wrong person. Mason got quiet after that. 3 days later, Nathan came back. And he brought Gloria with him. The moment I opened the apartment door, Gloria walked inside like she owned the place. Nathan followed behind her silently. Gloria sat on my couch without permission and crossed her legs elegantly. We need to discuss this like adults, she announced. I stayed standing. There's nothing to discuss. Nathan looked exhausted already, but Gloria was energized by conflict. He made a reasonable request, she insisted. No, I replied. He made an ultimatum. Nathan finally spoke. I was emotional. You were honest. His eyes flickered. That one hit him harder than yelling would have. Nathan stared at me across the apartment, like he was waiting for me to soften. I didn't. Gloria leaned forward on my couch, lowering her voice into something falsely maternal. Bianca, sweetheart, men sometimes struggle to communicate pressure properly. I almost smiled at that.
Pressure.
Such a gentle word for emotional blackmail. He told me the wedding was off unless I doubled the budget, I replied calmly. That sounds pretty clear to me. Nathan ran a hand through his hair aggressively. I didn't think you'd actually cancel everything. There it was. The truth. He thought I would surrender. I know, I said quietly. That sentence made something shift in the room. Nathan's face tightened with embarrassment more than anger. Gloria immediately stepped in again before he could speak. You two are throwing away years together over a misunderstanding. No, I corrected. We're ending because your son values appearances more than partnership. That's not fair, Nathan snapped. Isn't it? His silence answered for him. Then Nathan pulled out his phone and showed me a draft Instagram post. See? I already told people we're postponing the wedding until finances improve. I blinked slowly. You told people what? He frowned like I was being unreasonable. It sounds better than canceled. No, I said firmly. It's canceled. Gloria sighed dramatically. You're humiliating him. I laughed softly before I could stop myself. Nathan humiliated himself the moment he tried to put a price tag on our relationship. The apartment went silent again. Then I looked directly at Nathan. You should start moving your things out. His expression changed instantly. What? We're not together anymore. You're kicking me out? You ended the engagement. I said the wedding was off, not the relationship. I stared at him in disbelief. It honestly felt like he still believed he could rewind everything through sheer confidence. Nathan, I said carefully, those are the same thing. No, they aren't. Yes, I replied, they are. Gloria suddenly stood up. You can't throw him out like this. He's 31 years old, I said. He'll survive. Nathan's voice dropped lower. I can't afford rent right now. And there it was. The real fear underneath all the arrogance. Money. Again. I felt sympathy try to rise in my chest for half a second before I crushed it. Because he had no problem risking my financial future days earlier. Then maybe you shouldn't have gambled your housing stability on an ultimatum, I replied. His face went cold. Gloria exploded after that. She called me selfish, immature, cruel, vindictive. At one point, she even threatened legal action for emotional distress. I opened the apartment door and waited silently until they left. Nathan paused before stepping into the hallway. For 1 second, he looked less angry and more confused. Like he genuinely couldn't understand why his charm had stopped working. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. No, I answered. I'm correcting one. After they left, the real circus began. Nathan launched a full social media campaign without ever directly naming me. Photos of us together, sad captions about betrayal, posts about knowing your worth, quotes about unsupportive partners who fear growth. People filled the comments with assumptions. Poor Nathan, she sounds controlling. Some women don't appreciate good men. Vanessa became his loudest supporter almost immediately. She reposted his stories constantly, with comments like, a man should never have to beg for basic standards. I muted all of them. Not because it didn't hurt. Because I understood something dangerous about public humiliation. Once someone recruits an audience into your relationship, the relationship stops being private and starts becoming performance art. Nathan wanted spectators more than solutions. About 3 weeks later, I heard through mutual friends that he started dating someone named Chloe Bennett, a fitness influencer. Blonde, perfect teeth, thousands of Instagram followers, the kind of woman who photographed every meal before taking a bite. I didn't care at first. Then the posts started appearing. Expensive restaurants, luxury hotel rooftops, captions about finally finding someone who matches your energy. One photo showed Nathan standing beside Chloe in a designer suit I had never seen before. The caption read, "Real relationships elevate you." That one stung. Not because I wanted him back, because I suddenly realized he was rewriting our entire history into a villain story where he was trapped by someone beneath him. Mason saw the post too. He's trying really hard, he told me over drinks one night. People only perform happiness that aggressively when they need witnesses. I stared down at my wine glass quietly. I honestly don't recognize him anymore. Mason gave me a sad look. You probably never knew this version because life never tested his ego before. That sentence stayed with me. A month later, the wedding venue called. I was at work when my phone buzzed. Hello, is this Bianca Russo? The woman asked politely. Yes. This is Patricia from Rosewood Gardens. I'm calling regarding your wedding reservation. My stomach tightened slightly. Yes? There seems to be some confusion involving your former fiancé. I leaned back in my office chair slowly. What kind of confusion? Patricia hesitated carefully. Mr. Cole contacted us requesting access to the deposit and asking to move the ceremony date. I blinked hard. What? He stated the wedding was still happening under revised circumstances. I almost laughed from pure disbelief. Revised circumstances? He implied there would be a different bride. For a second, I genuinely thought I misheard her. Then she continued. When our staff explained the deposit legally belonged to the cardholder, he became extremely aggressive. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. He demanded we transfer the reservation immediately, Patricia added. When denied, he threatened negative publicity and insulted multiple employees. I rubbed my forehead slowly. I'm so sorry. There's no need to apologize. We actually banned him from the property afterward. That part almost made me choke laughing. Apparently Nathan had tried to recycle our wedding venue for a future wedding with Chloe. Like the relationship itself was interchangeable. I emailed the venue immediately, confirming the cancellation and requesting the deposit refund. Nathan found out within hours. He called me 17 times that night. I answered once. How dare you embarrass me like that? He snapped immediately. I nearly dropped my phone. Embarrass you? You knew Chloe saw those emails. Nathan, I said slowly, why would you try to use our wedding venue with another woman after barely a month? Because I moved on. No, I replied. You replaced. Silence. Then anger. You're bitter. I'm concerned, I corrected. He hung up. The next few months became exhausting. Nathan started telling people I stole his wedding money. He claimed he contributed equally financially. He hadn't contributed $1. Then the story evolved further. Suddenly I was financially abusive, controlling, manipulative. Vanessa amplified everything online, while Gloria treated Facebook like a courtroom. At one point, Gloria wrote, "Some women destroy good men because they can't handle masculine ambition." Masculine ambition apparently meant demanding someone else finance your lifestyle fantasies. Meanwhile, Bitcoin dropped hard. My $25,000 briefly sank below what I originally invested. Mason texted me, "You okay?" Not really, I admitted. But weirdly, I still didn't regret it. Because even losing money felt better than surrendering to manipulation. Around the same time, Nathan and Chloe started falling apart publicly. Turns out, Chloe liked attention almost as much as Nathan did. They fought constantly online, in passive-aggressive captions. One night Nathan posted, "Loyalty is rare." 2 hours later, Chloe posted, "So is honesty." It became impossible not to see the cracks. Then, one evening around 11:30, someone started pounding on my apartment door. Hard. I froze instantly. Then I heard Nathan yelling my name from the hallway. My stomach dropped. He sounded drunk. "Bianca, open the damn door!" I stayed completely silent. More pounding. "Please, just talk to me." Several neighboring apartment doors cracked open. I grabbed my phone and called the police. By the time officers arrived, Nathan was sitting against the hallway wall, crying angrily into his hands. I watched through the peephole while they escorted him downstairs. Before leaving, he looked up toward my apartment door with red, swollen eyes. For 1 second, he didn't look manipulative. He looked broken. And honestly, that almost hurt worse. The next morning, Gloria called from a new number because I had blocked her old one. "You called the police on Nathan?" He was drunk and screaming outside my apartment. He was emotional. At midnight. He wanted to apologize. I leaned against my kitchen counter, exhausted already. "Gloria, apologizing doesn't happen through intimidation." Then her voice sharpened. "You've become cold." That sentence nearly made me laugh. Because people who benefit from your softness always call boundaries cruelty. After we hung up, my mother called. My mom is the calmest, intimidating person I've ever known. Former Marine, quiet voice, absolutely terrifying when angry. "Gloria contacted me," she said immediately. I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry." She cried for 40 minutes about how you're ruining Nathan's life. And she made a mistake insulting my daughter. I smiled despite myself. "What did you say?" I said, "Actions have consequences." Then my mother paused. She also called me a bitter woman who raised a selfish daughter. I groaned quietly. "Mom." I already handled it. That tone told me not to ask further questions. A few days later, Harold contacted me privately for the first time. Nathan's father had always been quieter than Gloria. Reserved. Polite. Perpetually tired. His message simply read, "I'm sorry for all this." Then another appeared moments later. "You should know, Nathan recently learned about your Bitcoin investment." My stomach tightened instantly. And suddenly, everything started making sense. The random softening in Nathan's tone lately, the late-night apologies, the sudden emotional speeches. Harold sent one final message. "Be careful. Gloria believes if Nathan marries you eventually, he could claim part of your assets later." I stared at the screen for a very long time. Not because I was shocked. Because deep down, I already knew. After Harold warned me about Gloria's real intentions, something inside me changed. Permanently. Up until then, part of me still viewed Nathan as emotional, immature, influenced. But that message forced me to confront something uglier. Nathan wasn't trying to repair our relationship. He was trying to regain access. To me, to stability, to money, to the future he thought he lost ownership of. And once I accepted that truth, every interaction afterward became easier to see clearly. Chloe left him about 2 weeks later. Apparently, she discovered he was still talking about me constantly behind her back. One of Nathan's friends accidentally mentioned my name during a dinner, joking that Nathan still tracked my crypto investment like a divorced husband monitoring alimony. Chloe exploded. According to Tiffany, she threw a glass of wine at him in a steakhouse and called him emotionally bankrupt before storming out. Honestly, I almost respected her for that. Nathan responded the only way he knew how. By escalating. The texts started arriving from random numbers. "I miss you. I've changed. Nobody understands me like you do. We were supposed to build a life together." Then the messages became stranger. "You know we belong together. You felt it too. You can't erase 4 years." I blocked every number immediately. At first, the messages came every few days. Then every day. Then multiple times per day. Mason finally looked at me seriously one evening and said, "This isn't heartbreak anymore, Bianca. This is obsession." I knew he was right. Especially after Tiffany reached out privately. I almost ignored her message because I assumed she wanted another argument. Instead, she wrote, "I'm sorry for everything. Nathan's not okay." That caught my attention. We met quietly at a coffee shop near my office. Tiffany looked exhausted before she even sat down. "I shouldn't even be here," she admitted. "Then why are you?" She hesitated. "Because my brother's losing it." I stayed silent. Tiffany rubbed her hands together nervously. "He keeps saying you're soulmates. Gloria's feeding into it now because she thinks if you two get back together, everything fixes itself." I stared at her. What does that even mean? He thinks the universe is testing him. I almost laughed from disbelief. Instead, I asked, "Is he seeing anyone professionally?" Tiffany looked embarrassed. "Gloria says therapy is for weak people." Of course she did. Then Tiffany lowered her voice further. "Bianca, he's been driving past your apartment." A cold feeling spread slowly through my chest. "What?" "He thinks you're dating someone." I blinked. "Why?" "You posted a restaurant photo with 2 plates on the table." I almost laughed. "That was dinner with Mason after his promotion." "I know," Tiffany said softly, "but Nathan doesn't care about facts anymore." That conversation ended with Tiffany warning me to be careful. That same night, I ordered security cameras. Good thing I did. Because 4 nights later, my phone buzzed around 3 in the morning from the motion detection app. Half asleep, I opened the camera feed. Nathan stood outside my apartment door, wearing a dark hoodie. My stomach dropped instantly. He looked thinner, messier, restless. I watched silently through the app while he knelt down and slid a thick envelope underneath my door. Then he just sat there in the hallway for a moment, staring at the floor. It honestly felt sad more than frightening at first, until he whispered something toward the door. "I know you still love me." The certainty in his voice terrified me. After he finally left, I waited until sunrise before opening the envelope. Inside was a 10-page handwritten letter. 10 pages. Most of it rambled about destiny, cosmic timing, emotional awakening, and how a psychic told him we were twin flames temporarily separated by ego. At one point he wrote, "No matter who you date, your soul will always come back to me." That line made my skin crawl. Mason read the letter later and looked genuinely disturbed. He needs help. I know. You should seriously consider a restraining order. Part of me resisted that idea because restraining orders felt dramatic in my mind. But another part of me remembered the certainty in Nathan's voice outside my apartment. That certainty mattered. A week later, things became worse. Harold sent me a LinkedIn message late one night. Be careful. Gloria and Nathan are planning something involving your job. I read it 3 times. Then, 2 days later, HR called me into a meeting. The moment I walked into that office, my stomach sank. The HR representative looked uncomfortable already. Bianca, she said carefully, we received concerning allegations regarding harassment toward a former partner. My chest went cold. She turned her monitor slightly toward me. Screenshots. Text messages supposedly from me.
Threats. Manipulation. Emotional abuse.
Except they were obviously fake. The language sounded ridiculous. The messages read like someone trying to write a movie villain. One said, "You'll regret abandoning me financially." I almost laughed out loud because no human being actually talks like that. These are fake, I said immediately. We considered that possibility, HR replied calmly. Then she pointed at the phone numbers. None matched mine. Different area codes, different formatting, different devices. The relief nearly made me dizzy. Still, they documented everything formally in case additional complaints appeared later. When I left the office, I sat in my car shaking for almost 20 minutes. Not because I feared losing my job anymore, because Nathan crossed a line that permanently destroyed whatever sympathy remained inside me. False accusations don't come from love. They come from entitlement mixed with revenge. That night, I finally responded to one of Nathan's random numbers. Only once. Do not contact me again. His reply came instantly. So you can destroy my life, but I can't defend myself? I blocked the number without answering. A few days later, 3 different people contacted me unexpectedly through Facebook. All of them were my exes. Nathan had messaged them claiming I was dangerous, financially manipulative, and emotionally abusive. Apparently, he even offered one of them money to share their truth publicly. One of my exes, Ryan, called me laughing. Bianca, he said between laughs, I told him you're literally the most emotionally stable person I've ever dated. That's reassuring. He asked if you ever manipulated me financially. And? I told him our biggest fight was because you wanted to stay home playing board games instead of going clubbing. Despite everything, I laughed for the first time in days. Then Ryan's tone softened. He's trying really hard to make you look like the villain. I know. That usually means people already know he's the problem. I hoped he was right. Around that same time, Bitcoin exploded upward again. The value surged past 50,000. My original investment more than doubled. Mason nearly screamed when he called me. You lucky psycho. I laughed weakly. Trust me, this wasn't strategy. This was emotional damage with side effects. Still, I made smart decisions immediately. I sold part of the investment, paid off my car, moved money into conservative index funds, built savings. The entire experience weirdly reinforced something important for me. Real stability isn't flashy. It's quiet. Nathan never understood that. He still chased appearances, even while his life collapsed around him. A couple months later, I heard he started dating someone new. Rebecca Lawson, 56 years old, recently divorced, owned multiple dental clinics. Nathan met her while working temporary reception shifts after Chloe dumped him. Apparently, he lied constantly during the relationship. He told Rebecca he was 26 instead of 31, claimed he worked in luxury real estate, pretended he had never been engaged. Gloria loved Rebecca immediately, not because she liked her, because she liked Rebecca's money. Tiffany later told me Gloria kept referring to Rebecca as Nathan's second chance at security. That phrasing made me sick. Nathan posted endless photos with Rebecca online. Luxury vacations, wine tastings, captions about mature relationships and emotional peace. The performance never stopped. Then Rebecca's daughter found Nathan's old social media history. Everything unraveled after that. The wedding drama, the harassment, the fake HR complaint, the GoFundMe Nathan secretly created claiming I financially ruined him after forcing him to sacrifice his career for our relationship. Yes, he actually made a GoFundMe. It raised $81. One donation came from Gloria. Rebecca's daughter hired a private investigator after noticing inconsistencies in Nathan's stories. Within days, everything collapsed. Rebecca dumped him publicly during dinner at an upscale Italian restaurant. According to Tiffany, Nathan completely panicked. He accused Rebecca of spying on him, cried in the middle of the restaurant, then knocked over a basket of breadsticks while storming out. The story spread through our extended social circle immediately. Under different circumstances, maybe it would have been funny. Instead, it just felt tragic. Nathan had become someone completely consumed by appearances and desperation. Not long after that, Gloria called me one final time. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I needed closure too. The moment I picked up, she started crying. "You ruined his life." I closed my eyes slowly. "Gloria, I haven't spoken to Nathan in months. He was fine before you." "No," I replied quietly. "He was just hiding it better." Silence. Then anger replaced the tears instantly. "He's depressed. Nobody trusts him anymore." "That's because he lied. You abandoned him." "He gave me an ultimatum. He made a mistake." I finally lost patience. "No, Gloria. He made a choice, over and over again." Silence again. Then her voice became colder. "You think you're better than him because you made money. That's not why I walked away." "Then why?" I stared out my apartment window at the city lights for several long seconds. "Because love shouldn't feel like a negotiation." Gloria hung up without another word. And honestly, that was the last time I ever truly felt emotionally tied to any of them. After my final conversation with Gloria, everything gradually became quieter. Not immediately. People like Nathan and Gloria don't disappear gracefully. They burn through every possible emotional exit first. But eventually, even chaos exhausts itself. Tiffany stopped speaking to most of the family shortly afterward. According to Mason, she got tired of constantly defending behavior she privately knew was wrong. Harold moved into a separate apartment for several months while he and Gloria started counseling. Apparently, decades of enabling manipulation finally caught up to their marriage too. As for Nathan, the last updates I heard came mostly through mutual friends. He lost the temporary position at Rebecca's dental office after the private investigator's report circulated internally. The fake HR complaint became widely known among certain professional circles because Rebecca's daughter apparently despised dishonesty with frightening efficiency. Nathan bounced through short-term jobs after that. Call centers, sales positions, marketing assistant work. Every time, the pattern repeated. He quit quickly because the work felt beneath him. That phrase told me everything I needed to know. Nathan never actually wanted stability. He wanted the appearance of success without the humility required to build it slowly. Eventually, he moved back in with Gloria. 31 years old, living in his childhood bedroom, still posting motivational quotes online, pretending everything was temporary. The strangest part? A small piece of me still mourned him. Not the man he became. The man I thought he was before pressure exposed everything underneath. Sometimes grief isn't losing a person. Sometimes it's losing the future you imagined with them. For a while, I became paranoid about relationships entirely. I questioned my own judgment constantly. How did I miss the warning signs? Were they always there? Did I ignore them because I loved him? The truth is uncomfortable. Most toxic relationships don't begin dramatically. They begin with tiny moments you explain away because love makes excuses before it makes boundaries. Looking back, the signs existed long before the wedding fight. Nathan constantly compared himself to wealthier friends. He obsessed over status. He cared deeply about how strangers perceived him. Every disagreement somehow became a test of loyalty, and Gloria reinforced all of it. To her, appearances mattered more than honesty. A relationship wasn't supposed to be healthy. It was supposed to look impressive. Once I understood that, the entire collapse made sense. About 6 months after the breakup, my life finally started feeling peaceful again. Not exciting. Peaceful. And honestly, peace is underrated until you survive chaos. Bitcoin remained strong. I kept part of my investment and left the rest diversified safely. My apartment felt calm again. My phone stopped buzzing constantly. I started sleeping through the night. Then I met Daniel Hart. Completely by accident. Mason dragged me to a small board game night hosted by one of his coworkers. I almost canceled because I was exhausted from work, but staying home suddenly felt too familiar. Daniel was sitting quietly near the kitchen, explaining card rules to someone when I arrived. No designer clothes, no performance, no loud confidence demanding attention. Just calm. We started talking during a game neither of us fully understood. At one point, someone jokingly asked what kind of wedding Daniel would want someday. He laughed and said, "Honestly, probably Vegas. Spend the money on a house instead." I almost choked on my drink. He noticed immediately. "What?" I shook my head, smiling for the first time in a while. Long story. Over the next few months, Daniel slowly became part of my life in the healthiest way possible. No games, no manipulation, no public performances online. He never once treated love like leverage. One night, we sat together eating takeout on my couch while rain hit the windows softly outside. Daniel glanced around my apartment. "You know what I like about this place?" "What?" "It feels peaceful." That word hit me harder than he realized. Because Nathan always wanted our life to feel impressive. Daniel valued peace instead. The difference mattered more than money ever could. I eventually told him the entire story. Everything. The wedding, the ultimatum, the Bitcoin investment, the harassment, the fake accusations. Daniel listened quietly without interrupting. When I finished, he shook his head slowly. "You know the saddest part?" "What?" "Nathan probably still thinks losing the money was the tragedy." I stared at him for a second. Because he was right. Nathan never understood what he actually lost. Not access to Bitcoin, not financial stability. Trust. Safety. Partnership. A future built quietly together. Those things matter infinitely more than appearances, but people like Nathan only recognize value once it becomes public and measurable. A few weeks before Christmas, my mother mailed holiday cards to family friends. One of them went to Gloria. Inside was a photo of me smiling beside Daniel during a hiking trip. When Mom told me, I laughed so hard I nearly spilled coffee. "That's petty." "Yes," she replied proudly, "but effective." Apparently, Gloria never responded. I wasn't surprised. By then, Nathan's reputation had deteriorated badly among most people who knew the full story. Vanessa quietly distanced herself once the public sympathy disappeared. Rebecca's daughter apparently warned others privately about him. Even some of Nathan's closest friends stopped defending his behavior. Because eventually, patterns become impossible to ignore. The last real update I heard came from Tiffany, nearly a year after the breakup. Nathan was working at a customer support center and rarely left the house except for work. Gloria still blamed everyone else for his problems. Harold mostly stayed silent. Tiffany herself started therapy. Honestly, I think she was the only one in that family trying to break the cycle instead of feeding it. Sometimes people ask whether I would ever give Nathan another chance if he truly changed. My answer is always no. Not because I hate him. Because certain lines permanently alter how safe someone feels to you. The fake accusations alone destroyed any possibility of trust forever. Once someone is willing to weaponize your reputation, your job, and your stability to regain control, the relationship stops being repairable. It becomes dangerous. And honestly, the wedding ultimatum itself taught me everything I needed to know long before the harassment began. Nathan loved me when he believed I would comply. The moment I refused, love became conditional. That's not partnership. That's negotiation. If I learned anything from the entire disaster, it's this. Ultimatums are not communication. They are control disguised as standards. People who shame responsibility are usually unprepared for real partnership. And anyone who suddenly rediscovers their love for you after hearing you became successful isn't chasing connection. They're chasing access. Most importantly, being stable and boring is not a flaw. Stable people pay bills on time. Stable people don't threaten your future to win arguments. Stable people don't recruit social media armies against you. Stable people make you feel safe instead of anxious. That kind of love may not look flashy online, but it survives real life. As for me, I'm happy. Not movie ending happy, not perfect life happy, just peaceful. And after everything that happened, peaceful feels like winning. My name is Beatrice Collins. I'm 32 years old, and this whole thing started on a Thursday night that felt painfully ordinary at first. The kind of night you never realize is important until it quietly divides your life into before and after. Nathan Mercer was standing beside me in our kitchen while I chopped onions for dinner. We'd been together for 4 years, living together for 2. Long enough that our routines had become automatic, familiar, predictable. Or at least I thought they were. He leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone, with the kind of focus people usually reserve for important conversations. I remember the blue glow from his screen reflecting against his jawline, while the smell of garlic and butter filled the apartment. Then casually, without even looking up, he said, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to Talia's birthday party Saturday." I paused mid-slice. "Talia?" I asked carefully. "My ex-girlfriend Talia?" "Yeah," he said simply. Still scrolling. Still not looking at me. "It's her 30th birthday. The whole high school group's going. Just old friends and nostalgia stuff." Then finally, almost as an afterthought, he glanced up. "You weren't invited, though. It's really just for people from back then, so don't wait up." There are moments in relationships where something tiny reveals something enormous. That sentence was one of those moments. Not because I desperately needed to attend some birthday party for a woman I barely knew. It wasn't jealousy in the dramatic movie sense. It was the delivery. The carelessness. The quiet assumption that my feelings would simply adjust themselves around whatever he wanted. "You weren't invited." Like I was a coworker. Like I was temporary. Like I existed outside the important parts of his life. Every instinct in me wanted to react immediately. I wanted to ask why his ex-girlfriend still mattered enough to exclude me. I wanted to point out how inappropriate the whole thing sounded. But instead, something strange happened. I got calm. Dangerously calm. The kind of calm that usually appears right before something breaks permanently. I looked at him for a long moment and simply said, "Enjoy yourself." That finally got his attention. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "That's it?" he asked. "You're cool with it?" "You're going either way, right?" I asked. "Well, yeah." "Then enjoy yourself." For half a second, he looked disappointed. Like he had prepared for a fight and didn't know what to do without one. Then he smiled. "Thanks for being mature about it."
Mature.
Funny word. People love calling women mature when they quietly swallow disrespect. I went back to chopping onions while he returned to his phone. But something inside me had already started shifting. Saturday came faster than I expected. And that night became impossible to ignore. Nathan spent nearly 3 hours getting ready. 3 hours. For a nostalgia party. He showered twice because he hated how his hair looked after the first one. He changed outfits 4 separate times. He sprayed on the expensive cologne I bought him last Christmas, the one he normally saved for anniversaries or formal events. At one point he even asked, "Do you think this shirt makes me look older?" I stared at him from the edge of the bed. "You look nice," I said carefully. He smiled immediately. The kind of smile people give when they want to impress someone. "Thanks, B." Then came the final detail that lodged itself deep into my chest. "I'll probably crash at Brianna's place if it gets too late," he said casually, while adjusting his watch. "You know how these nights go." Brianna. Another female friend from high school. Another woman I barely knew. I remember looking at him standing there in the mirror, fully dressed, smelling incredible, looking nervous and excited in a way I hadn't seen in months. And suddenly I realized something awful. Nathan didn't look like a man attending a casual birthday party. He looked like a man hoping to be remembered. At 7:30 p.m., he grabbed his keys. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. "Totally," I said softly. He kissed my cheek. Then he left. And the second the apartment door closed, I turned my phone completely off. No hesitation. No dramatic crying. No rage. Just clarity. I packed a small overnight bag, grabbed my charger, left a short note on the kitchen counter, and walked out of the apartment myself. Earlier that week, before Nathan made his little announcement, my older sister Evelyn had invited me to spend the weekend at her place. She lived almost 2 hours away, and we'd talked about checking out a new wine district nearby. At the time, I'd told her I probably couldn't make it. Funny how fast priorities change. The drive felt strangely peaceful. No music. Just headlights stretching across dark roads while my thoughts slowly untangled themselves. I kept replaying Nathan's voice in my head. You weren't invited. Don't wait up. It's strange how disrespect rarely arrives all at once. Usually it comes in tiny pieces. Tiny dismissals. Tiny, selfish choices. Tiny moments where someone quietly assumes you'll tolerate being placed second. By the time I reached Evelyn's house, it was almost 10 p.m. She opened the door wearing fuzzy socks and immediately narrowed her eyes. "Oh no," she said. That alone nearly made me cry. Because sisters know. Sometimes they know before you even speak. "What happened?" she asked softly. "Nathan went to his ex-girlfriend's birthday party," I said. "Anne told me not to wait up." Evelyn blinked once. "Absolutely not." I laughed quietly, despite myself. That was the exact response I didn't realize I needed. Not gaslighting. Not minimizing. Not, "you're overthinking." Just immediate understanding. I turned my phone back on while sitting at her kitchen table. The notifications exploded instantly. 8 texts. 3 missed calls. The first messages were irritated. "Hey, why aren't you answering? Did your phone die? Okay, seriously, this is weird." Then came anger. "Wow, mature. Are you seriously ignoring me?" Then panic. "B, call me. I'm getting worried." "Where are you?" Evelyn read over my shoulder silently. Then she looked at me carefully. "He expected you to stay home," she said. I stared down at the screen. Yeah, that was exactly it. Nathan wanted freedom. But he still expected emotional access to me whenever he wanted it. He wanted me available. Waiting.
Stable. Predictable.
Like emotional furniture. I turned my phone back off. Sunday morning, I finally checked it again. 23 new texts. 5 voicemails. And now the tone had completely changed. One voicemail sounded angry. "This silent treatment thing is childish, Beatrice." The next sounded nervous. "I came home and your car's gone. Where are you?" Then came fear. Actual fear. "Please just tell me you're okay." By the 4th voicemail, his voice cracked. "I'll apologize if that's what you want. Just call me back." Then finally anger again. "Fine." Evelyn answered when I called her. "I know you're there. We need to talk." I looked at Evelyn. She told him? "He sounded panicked," she said. "I told him you were alive, that's all." Honestly, that was enough. The rest of Sunday passed quietly. We painted part of Evelyn's guest room. We got lunch. We walked through antique shops downtown. And through all of it, one thought kept circling in my mind. Nathan genuinely believed he could exclude me, disrespect me, spend the night emotionally orbiting his ex-girlfriend, and still come home expecting me, exactly where he left me. By 6 p.m., I finally drove home. I pulled into the apartment complex around 8:30. Nathan's car was already there. The lights inside the apartment glowed against the dark parking lot. I sat in my car for almost 30 seconds before finally stepping out. The second I walked through the front door, Nathan shot up from the couch. His face looked exhausted. Panicked.
Furious.
"Where the hell have you been?" "Evelyn's place," I said. Nathan stared at me like I had just confessed to a crime. "You disappeared for 2 days." "I left a note." "A note?" he repeated, almost laughing. "Beatrice, you vanished with a note." "You told me not to wait up," I said. "So I didn't." His mouth opened.
Closed.
Then tightened. "That is not what that means, and you know it." I set my overnight bag beside the door. "What did it mean then?" He paused. Just long enough. Long enough for both of us to understand that there was no clean answer. "It means don't stay awake worrying," he said finally. "Not disappear completely." "I didn't disappear. I went to my sister's." "You ignored my calls." "You were at Talia's party," I said. I didn't want to interrupt. His face flushed. "This is about Talia. It's about respect." Oh my God. He dragged both hands through his hair. "It was one party. One party you spent 3 hours getting ready for." His jaw hardened. "One party where you wore the cologne I bought you." "B. One party for your ex-girlfriend," I finished. "It wasn't like that." "Then explain what it was like." He looked away. And that small movement hurt more than I expected. Because if there had been an easy explanation, he would have thrown it at me instantly. Instead, he chose frustration. You're twisting this. Am I? Yes. From where I'm standing, I said quietly. My boyfriend got dressed like he was going on a date, went to his ex-girlfriend's birthday party, told me I wasn't welcome, suggested he might stay out all night at another woman's place, then got angry because I didn't sit here waiting for him. Nathan's eyes narrowed. You're making it sound disgusting. No, I said. I'm making it sound accurate. That was when his tone changed. The anger softened. His shoulders lowered. He stepped closer, wearing the version of himself that used to undo me. Baby, he said gently, I didn't mean to hurt you. I hated how familiar that voice was, how trained my body was to relax at the sound of it. But this time, I didn't move. I didn't mean for you to feel excluded, he continued. It was just high school people. It wasn't romantic. Did Talia know I wasn't invited? He blinked. What? Did she specifically say partners weren't invited? He hesitated. There it was again. That tiny pause. That small doorway where truth leaked out. It was just implied, he said. By who? Beatrice? By who, Nathan? He exhaled sharply. It wasn't that serious. I gave a small nod. Right. He stepped back, frustrated again. You're impossible when you get like this. When I ask direct questions? When you act like I'm on trial? You put yourself there. His face changed then. Coldness slipped into his expression. You're jealous. I'm not jealous. You are, and honestly, I thought we were past this insecurity thing. I almost laughed. Because there it was. The classic shortcut. When someone doesn't want to discuss their behavior, they diagnose your reaction. I'm not insecure, I said. I'm done being treated like an afterthought. He scoffed. I went to a party. You went to your ex-girlfriend's party. I didn't cheat. I didn't say you did. Then why are you acting like I betrayed you? I looked at him for a long moment. Because you did. The room went silent. Not physically.
Emotionally.
Something dropped between us so heavily that neither of us could pretend not to hear it. Nathan's eyes sharpened. That's insane. No, I said. It's just not the kind of betrayal you can excuse by saying nothing physical happened. His expression twisted. So what now? You're breaking up with me over a party? I don't know yet. His face faltered. That was the first moment real fear appeared. What does that mean? It means I need to think. Think about what? Whether I want to keep building a life with someone who thinks this is normal. His fear vanished fast. Anger took its place. You're being ridiculous. Maybe. Everyone is allowed to have old friends. Of course. Then what's the problem? The problem is that you didn't treat me like your partner, I said. You treated me like someone who had no right to be included, no right to be considered, and no right to react. He stared at me, breathing hard. For a second, I thought he might actually hear me. Then he said, I'm tired. So was I. I picked up my bag and walked toward the bedroom. Where are you going? He demanded. To get ready for work tomorrow. We're not done talking. We are for tonight. You can't just ignore me. That line almost made me smile. Because apparently he understood abandonment perfectly when he was the one feeling it. I can, I said. And tonight, I am. I walked into the bedroom and locked the door. It was the first time I had ever locked Nathan out. He knocked for a few minutes, then pounded once. Then, silence. The next week turned our apartment into a museum of everything we weren't saying. Nathan tried everything. Soft apologies. Angry accusations. Long hugs that felt more like traps than comfort. He left coffee for me in the morning. Then complained at night that I was punishing him. He said he loved me. Then said I was cruel. He said he understood. Then immediately asked when I would get over it. And every time he changed tactics, something inside me stepped farther back. A lot of people call distance the silent treatment. But sometimes distance is just your nervous system finally refusing to stand in the fire. A week after the party, he sat beside me on the couch while I was reading. Too close. Like closeness could erase the conversation we hadn't finished. "I talked to Brianna," he said. I didn't look up. "Okay." "She thinks you're being controlling." That made me close the book. Slowly. "Of course she does. She said it's unhealthy to punish someone for seeing old friends." "I didn't punish you. You disappeared. I made my own plans after you told me not to wait up." He rubbed his face. "Why do you keep saying that like it's some clever point?" "Because it's true. You know I didn't mean leave the house for 2 days. And you knew telling your girlfriend she wasn't invited to your ex-girlfriend's birthday party was disrespectful." He didn't answer. So I continued. "If I told you I was going to my ex-boyfriend's birthday party, that you weren't invited, that I might sleep at another man's place afterward, and then I spent 3 hours getting ready, what would you do?" His eyes flicked away. Silence. Again, silence had become Nathan's most honest language. "That's what I thought," I said. He stood up. "You're twisting everything to make me the villain." "No, I'm asking you to imagine being me." I already apologized. "You said you were sorry I was upset." "That's an apology." "No," I said. "That's a complaint wearing a costume." His face went red. The next evening, his mother called me. Diane Mercer had never liked being challenged. She had the kind of voice that could turn concern into accusation without changing volume. "We need to talk about Nathan," she said. "Hello to you too, Diane." "Don't be sarcastic. My son is devastated." "I'm sure he is. He says you've been giving him the silent treatment over a birthday party." "That's not accurate." "So you're not being distant?" "I'm being thoughtful." "Thoughtful?" she snapped. "You walked out and ignored him." "He told me not to wait up." There was a pause. Then she sighed dramatically. "Beatrice, men say things poorly sometimes. That doesn't mean you destroy a 4-year relationship." "Did he tell you whose party it was?" "Talia's," she said. "An old friend." "His ex-girlfriend?" "She's allowed to exist." "Absolutely," I said. "And I'm allowed to decide what I accept." Diane laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You sound very proud of yourself." "No," I said. "Just awake." That shut her up for half a second. Then she lowered her voice. "He loves you." "Then he has a strange way of showing it." I ended the call before she could turn motherhood into a weapon again. Saturday morning, Brianna showed up at our apartment without asking. Nathan let her in. She walked into the living room like she had been invited to judge a case already decided in her favor. "Beatrice," she said, "we need to talk." "Do we?" "Yes, Nathan is falling apart." I looked past her at Nathan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That told me everything. Brianna sat down across from me and folded her hands. "You're being unfair." "I'm listening." "He went to a party, that's it." "No," I said. "He went to his ex-girlfriend's party, told me I wasn't invited, dressed up for it, planned to possibly stay out all night, then got angry when I didn't wait at home." She rolled her eyes. "Men like to look good. That doesn't mean anything." "For their ex-girlfriends?" "You sound insecure." I smiled faintly. Not because it was funny. Because I finally saw the script. Step 1, dismiss the action. Step 2, attack the reaction. Step 3, call the boundary toxic. "I didn't tell him he couldn't go," I said. "But you punished him afterward." I left. "To make him panic." "No," I said. "To stop myself from sitting alone in an apartment feeling humiliated." Nathan finally spoke. "You did it to hurt me." I turned to him. "No, I did it because I was hurt." Brianna shook her head. "If you can't handle him having female friends, maybe this relationship isn't healthy." Something settled inside me. Not anger. Clarity. "You're right," I said. Nathan looked up quickly. "What?" "If he thinks this was fine, and you think my boundaries are the problem, then maybe this relationship isn't healthy." His face drained slightly. "B." "No," I said. "I'm done arguing about basic respect. Either you understand why it was wrong, or you don't. If you don't, this won't work." Brianna scoffed. "That sounds manipulative." "It's honest." Nathan's voice cracked. "You don't mean that." I stood and picked up my keys. "I do." "Where are you going?" "Out." His panic returned. I looked at him once before opening the door. And unlike you, I'll actually answer my phone if there's an emergency. Then I left. I drove around for almost an hour that night. No destination. No music. Just movement. Sometimes your body keeps driving because stopping means admitting something has already ended. Eventually, I found myself outside Evelyn's house again. She opened the door wearing sweatpants and took one look at my face before stepping aside. "No questions," she said softly. "Just come in." I nearly broke right there. Because kindness feels unbearable when you've spent weeks defending your pain to people determined to minimize it. Evelyn handed me a glass of wine and sat beside me on the couch. "So," she said carefully, "what happened now?" "Nathan brought Brianna over to explain why I'm toxic." Evelyn blinked slowly. "Oh, absolutely not." I laughed despite myself. Then suddenly, I was crying. Not dramatic sobbing. Just exhausted tears. The kind that come when your body finally realizes it's been holding tension for too long. "I feel insane," I admitted quietly. "You're not insane. He keeps acting like I'm overreacting." "That's because if he admits you're right," Evelyn said, "then he has to admit what he did was selfish." I leaned back against the couch cushions. "And maybe it was selfish," I whispered. "But maybe I could have handled it better too." Evelyn looked at me carefully. "That's the thing about decent people," she said. "They always audit themselves first." Her words stayed with me all night. Because she was right. I had spent 2 straight weeks examining my reaction from every possible angle, while Nathan spent those same 2 weeks trying to convince me my feelings were the problem. Sunday evening, I finally went back to the apartment. Nathan was sitting at the kitchen counter when I walked in. He stood immediately. "You left again." I needed space. "We can't keep doing this." I set my purse down, slowly. "No," I agreed. "We can't." For a second, hope flickered across his face. Like, maybe he thought I was finally surrendering. Then he said quietly, "I'm sorry about the party." I studied him carefully. His posture. His expression. The slight nervous tapping of his fingers against the countertop. "I didn't realize it would hurt you this much," he continued. There it was again. Not, "I understand why it was wrong." Not, "I regret disrespecting you." Just, "I didn't realize your feelings would become inconvenient." "The party hurt," I said calmly. "But what hurt more was everything after." His brows furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means the defensiveness, the excuses, Brianna showing up here to lecture me, your mother calling me dramatic." Nathan sighed heavily. "They were trying to help." "No," I said. "They were trying to pressure me." "That's not fair." "What's not fair is recruiting people to convince me my boundaries are irrational." He rubbed his jaw. I felt cornered. And I felt humiliated. Silence stretched between us again. Then finally he asked quietly, "So what now?" I looked around the apartment. Our apartment. The couch we picked out together. The framed pictures. The little domestic details that suddenly looked temporary. "I don't know," I admitted. That answer terrified him more than anger ever could. "How much longer are you going to do this?" he asked. "Do what?" "Punish me." I almost smiled. Because somehow, even now, he still believed my pain existed primarily to inconvenience him. "I'm not punishing you," I said softly. "I'm trying to decide if I still trust you." His face hardened instantly. "Over one stupid party." And there it was. The sentence that finally broke something permanently inside me. Because if he still thought this was about one party, then he had never listened at all. The next 2 weeks became unbearable. I moved into the spare bedroom. Nathan hated it. Every morning he asked if we could talk. Every night he asked if I was over it yet. He'd kiss my shoulder while I made coffee, like affection could bypass accountability. And every single time, I felt myself withdrawing further. One Tuesday evening, I came home from work exhausted and emotionally numb. The moment I stepped inside the apartment, I froze. Nathan was sitting in the living room. Beside him sat Brianna, and another woman from his friend group named Chelsea. All 3 turned toward me at once. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Chelsea smiled carefully. We're worried about you." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. "You staged an intervention?" Nathan stood quickly. "B, just listen." "No," I interrupted. "Actually, I'd love to hear this." Brianna crossed her arms. "You've been emotionally punishing him for weeks." I moved into another room. "You're freezing him out." "I'm protecting my peace." Chelsea leaned forward with that fake gentle tone people use when they've already decided you're unstable. "At some point," she said softly, "healthy relationships require forgiveness." I looked directly at her. "Forgiveness requires accountability first." Nathan exhaled sharply. "I already apologized." "No," I said. "You apologized that I reacted." "That's semantics." "No," I replied calmly. "That's emotional responsibility." Brianna rolled her eyes dramatically. "This is exhausting." "You're welcome to leave." Nathan stepped closer. "Beatrice, please, I'm trying here." "No," I said quietly. "You're trying to end the conversation without understanding it." His frustration exploded instantly. "What else do you want from me?" "The truth." "I told you the truth." "No," I said. "You told me the version that makes you comfortable." His jaw clenched. "I did not cheat on you." "I know." "Then why are we still here?" "Because emotional betrayal still counts." The room went silent. Nathan stared at me like I had slapped him. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" "Yes." I stepped forward slowly. "You told me I wasn't invited because your ex-girlfriend's comfort mattered more than mine." "That's not true." "You spent hours preparing for her party." "It was a party." "You planned to stay out overnight." "At Brianna's house." "With women I barely know." "You're twisting this." "No," I snapped for the first time in weeks. "I'm finally saying it out loud exactly the way it happened." Nathan looked genuinely stunned by the anger in my voice. "Good. Because I was tired of performing calmness just to make everyone else comfortable." Chelsea spoke carefully. "I think maybe you're projecting deeper insecurities onto this situation." I turned toward her slowly. "You've known me for what, 2 years?" She shifted uncomfortably. "You don't know what I tolerate. You don't know how many small dismissals came before this. You don't know how exhausting it is defending basic respect to people determined to call it insecurity." Nathan threw both hands up. "Oh my God, it was nostalgia, that's all." "Nostalgia for what?" I asked sharply. Silence. Again. Always silence when the truth got too close. "For high school," he muttered, "while trying to look attractive for your ex-girlfriend." "That's not fair." "It's accurate." His face reddened. "You're impossible. And you're defensive because you know exactly how this looked." Brianna stood up abruptly. "This is toxic." That word again.
Toxic.
The favorite label people use when boundaries inconvenience them. Something inside Nathan shifted suddenly. His sadness vanished. So did the guilt. In its place came anger. Cold anger. "Fine," he said flatly. "Maybe I should leave then." I crossed my arms. "Maybe you should." Chelsea looked shocked that I didn't immediately panic. Nathan stared at me, waiting, expecting me to back down. When I didn't, his voice sharpened. "If I leave, I'm taking half of everything." I blinked once. "What?" "We lived together for 2 years," he snapped. "I have rights." The sheer entitlement in his tone nearly took my breath away. "The apartment is in my name. I contributed." "You gave me $400 a month," I said calmly. "Rent alone is $1,800. His face darkened. "I paid what I could." "And I never complained," I replied. "Until now." Chelsea jumped in quickly. "He invested years into this relationship. And I invested almost everything else." Brianna scoffed. "So now you're keeping score?" "No," I said quietly. But Nathan just turned heartbreak into a negotiation. That landed. Hard. Because deep down, he knew it was true. He stared at me for several long seconds. Then finally, he laughed bitterly. "You know what? Fine." He grabbed his jacket. "I'll come back for my stuff. With witnesses. Brianna added coldly. That's fine, I said. Nathan paused near the door, and for one tiny second, I saw something fragile in his face. Not anger, not pride, fear. Like he suddenly realized this had gone much farther than he intended. But instead of apologizing, he left. The apartment door slammed shut behind all three of them, and the silence afterward felt enormous. I stood there, alone, in the middle of the living room, staring at the space where my relationship had just collapsed. Then slowly, I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started making a list of everything in the apartment that actually belonged to Nathan. Turns out, there wasn't much. The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely calm. Not happy. Not relieved. Just clear. Like the emotional fog had finally burned away overnight. I made coffee in complete silence and sat at the kitchen counter staring at the inventory list I'd finished around 2 a.m. Nathan's side of our shared life looked painfully small, written down in bullet points.
Clothes.
Shoes.
Gaming console.
Books.
A watch collection.
A desk I'd bought him for his birthday 2 years earlier. That was basically it. Everything else in the apartment had either belonged to me before he moved in or had been purchased almost entirely with my money. And honestly, I would have shared things fairly if he hadn't threatened me. That was the part he never understood. I wasn't trying to destroy him. I was reacting to the ugliness he revealed once he stopped getting his way. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Nathan, we're coming by at 2. We. Not I. Of course not. At exactly 2:07 p.m., the apartment door opened. Nathan walked in first. Diane followed right behind him, like an attorney entering court. Brianna came last. Apparently, we were still doing witnesses. Diane looked around the apartment with immediate hostility. This is ridiculous, she announced before anyone even sat down. I slid the printed inventory list across the table. That's everything Nathan owns here. She scanned it once. Then twice. Then slowly looked up. That's it? That's what belongs to him. What about the couch? She demanded. I bought it before he moved in. The television? Mine. The dining table? Mine. Nathan stood awkwardly near the hallway, watching his mother interrogate me, like she still believed aggression could rewrite facts. Diane tossed the paper onto the counter. You're being spiteful. No, I said calmly. I'm being accurate. Nathan finally spoke. So after 4 years, this is what I meant to you? That almost hurt. Almost. But then I remembered him threatening to take half of everything 5 minutes after calling our relationship toxic. You meant a lot to me, I said quietly. Until you turned our breakup into a transaction. His jaw tightened. I was angry. So was I. Brianna crossed her arms. This whole thing is cold. I looked directly at her. No, what's cold is telling your girlfriend she's not invited because your ex-girlfriend's comfort matters more. Nathan closed his eyes briefly, like he physically couldn't tolerate hearing it anymore. Good. Because I'd spent weeks tolerating everyone else minimizing it. For the next hour, they packed Nathan's belongings in tense silence. At one point, he picked up the framed photo from our trip to Seattle. The one where he'd wrapped his arms around me in the rain, while laughing at something I couldn't even remember anymore. He stared at it for several seconds, then quietly placed it back down. Keep it, I said. He looked at me carefully. Why? Because I don't want reminders of people who made me question my self-respect. That one hurt him. I could see it immediately. Not because I yelled. Not because I insulted him. Because it was honest. Near the end, Diane pulled me aside while Nathan carried boxes to his car. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because every manipulative person eventually says the same thing when guilt stops working. She really loved you, Diane continued. Then she made the mistake of saying the one thing she thought would weaken me. No one is ever going to love Nathan the way you did. I looked her directly in the eyes. And maybe that's the problem. Her expression hardened instantly. Then she walked away. Nathan came back inside one final time after the last box was loaded. The apartment suddenly looked bigger without his things scattered everywhere. He stood near the doorway, awkwardly, like a stranger visiting someone else's home. "I never cheated on you," he said quietly. There it was. One last attempt to redefine the argument into something easier to defend. "I know," I replied. "Then why does this feel like punishment for cheating?" "Because betrayal doesn't always require touching someone else." His face fell slightly, and for the first time in weeks, he looked genuinely sad instead of defensive. "I loved you, B." I swallowed carefully. "I think you loved being prioritized." That one landed too. He looked away first, then finally nodded once, and left. The silence afterward felt different this time. Not lonely. Clean. That's the only word for it. Clean. A few days later, Nathan texted me from a new number. "We need to discuss the security deposit." "You weren't on the lease," I replied. "I still contributed." "You contributed $400 monthly." Then came the threats.
Legal action. Compensation.
Emotional damages. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Then, 2 days later, an actual lawyer's letter showed up.
Cheap paper. Cheap language.
Very dramatic. It demanded financial compensation for emotional distress and unfair displacement from a shared residence. I almost framed it for comedy. Instead, I had a professional friend respond with something short and devastatingly factual. Nathan Mercer was not on the lease. Nathan Mercer had no ownership claim. Further harassment would be documented. That ended the legal threats immediately. Funny how fast confidence disappears when facts arrive. About 6 weeks later, mutual friends started reaching out quietly. Not publicly.
Privately. Carefully.
One woman I barely knew from Nathan's college years messaged me late one night. "This sounds familiar." Apparently, Nathan had done something similar in a previous relationship. Not identical, but close enough. Prioritizing another woman, making his girlfriend feel unreasonable for reacting, recruiting friends to defend him afterward. That message hit me harder than I expected. Not because it validated me, because it saddened me. Patterns are depressing once you recognize them. I didn't date anyone afterward. Honestly, I didn't want to. I spent more time with Evelyn instead. I focused on work. I rearranged the apartment. Bought a new bookshelf. Turned Nathan's old desk into a small reading corner near the window after confirming through text that he didn't want it. Slowly, the apartment started feeling like mine again instead of ours. Brianna tried adding me on social media once. Blocked. Diane sent me a long email about forgiveness and pride. Deleted. Then finally, almost 2 months later, Nathan sent one last text. "I hope you're happy. You ruined my life over nothing." I read it twice, then set my phone down without responding. Because the truth was, I was happy. Not because he suffered. Not because I won. I was happy because peace feels unbelievable after spending months defending your right to basic respect. Nathan kept insisting this was about one party. But deep down, I don't think it ever was. I think the party simply exposed something that had already been quietly growing underneath our relationship for a long time.
Entitlement. Dismissal.
The expectation that I would absorb discomfort quietly to preserve his comfort. And when I finally stopped doing that, everything collapsed. Some people told me I overreacted. Maybe they would have tolerated it. Maybe they would have forgiven faster. Maybe they would have stayed. But I've realized something important since then. A relationship that only survives when one person stays silent isn't healthy love. It's emotional management. And I was exhausted from managing someone else's selfishness while apologizing for my pain. Here are the lessons I took from all of it. If your partner treats you like an option, believe them the first time. "I'm sorry you're upset" is not the same thing as "I'm sorry I hurt you." When someone recruits friends and family into your private conflict to pressure you, that usually isn't care. It's control. Boundaries are not punishments. They are information. And finally, self-respect feels far better than love that constantly requires you to shrink yourself to keep it alive. Sometimes people think relationships end because of one dramatic event. But often, the ending starts much earlier. In tiny moments, tiny dismissals, tiny selfish choices, tiny sentences like, You weren't invited. And maybe the real tragedy isn't losing the relationship. Maybe the real tragedy is how long you stayed quiet before finally realizing you deserved better. My name is Audrey Knight. I'm 35 years old, and until last winter, I genuinely believed I was about to marry the man I would spend the rest of my life with. His name was Caleb Mercer. We had been together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months, and living in my Denver townhouse for almost 2 of those years. The townhouse mattered. Not because it was luxurious, but because it was mine, long before Caleb entered my life. I bought it in 2019 after years of saving obsessively, skipping vacations, working overtime, and rebuilding my finances after a brutal recession nearly wiped me out in my late 20s. The mortgage and deed were entirely under my name. My down payment had been $62,000 from my personal savings. My monthly payment was $21.40. Caleb covered groceries and utilities most months, although sometimes he fell behind, and I quietly handled it. Because relationships are supposed to involve grace. At least, that's what I used to think. The strange thing about manipulation is that it rarely arrives screaming. It arrives disguised as vulnerability, security, fear, love. Wedding planning changed Caleb slowly enough that I kept convincing myself I was imagining it. Every conversation somehow became a measurement of loyalty. If I loved him, I needed to prove it. The engagement ring cost $4,600. The venue deposit was $3,200. The photographer deposit was another $1,100. Every time I hesitated about spending more money, Caleb would sigh heavily and say things like, "You're making me feel unsafe about our future." Unsafe. That word became his favorite weapon. I remember the exact moment something inside me finally cracked. It was a Friday night. Snow pressed softly against the kitchen windows while we sat at the island scrolling through vendor emails. Caleb suddenly placed his phone face down and looked at me with this eerie calmness that immediately made my stomach tighten. "Dead serious," he said. "Put the townhouse in my name or I'm not marrying you." For a second, I genuinely thought I misunderstood him. "Add you to the deed?" I asked carefully. He nodded like this was completely reasonable. "Half. Joint ownership. Whatever," he said. "I'm not walking into a marriage where you can throw me out and leave me with nothing." I stared at him. There are moments when your body recognizes danger before your brain catches up. My chest felt cold. I kept my voice level anyway. "We can do a prenup," I said. "We can do estate planning, savings accounts, wills, kids planning, whatever makes you feel secure. But I'm not signing over a property I bought before I even met you because you threatened to leave." Then Caleb leaned forward slightly and said the sentence that destroyed our relationship forever. "It's not a threat," he said quietly. "It's a trust test." Trust test. I still remember how those words echoed in my head, because suddenly, everything made sense. The endless pressure, the guilt, the constant emotional exams. The marriage itself was no longer the goal. Control was. I looked at him for a long moment before saying softly, "Then we're not getting married." His expression changed instantly. Not heartbreak. Not sadness. Anger. "So you're choosing a house over me?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm choosing a relationship without ultimatums." Then came the rehearsed lines. "You know what?" he snapped. "My sister warned me about women like you. Financially abusive women who use money to control men." The speed of that response chilled me even more. Like they had practiced this conversation already. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Honestly, I think Caleb expected both. Instead, I quietly packed a bag and drove to my older sister Vanessa's apartment across town. 10 minutes after I left, my phone exploded. "I didn't mean it like that. Please answer. You're overreacting." I was scared. "Come home." Then anger. Then guilt. Then sadness. Back and forth like emotional whiplash. Vanessa sat beside me on the couch, watching my phone light up every 30 seconds. Finally, she asked softly, "Audrey, has he always talked to you like this?" I opened my mouth to defend him automatically, then stopped, because suddenly, I wasn't sure anymore. That night, I did something incredibly boring. and incredibly important. I became practical. I canceled the wedding venue first. We lost the $3,200 deposit. Honestly, it felt cheaper than the divorce would have been. Then I moved the remaining $6,400 from our wedding account back into my personal account and texted Caleb that I'd reimburse every cent he contributed once he showed receipts. Over 8 months, he had contributed around $900 total. I wasn't trying to punish him. I just finally understood I needed boundaries. I changed every password he had access to.
Banking.
Email. Streaming accounts. Garage code. Smart lock. Everything. Then I started boxing his belongings carefully. Folded clothes, labeled boxes, no drama. At 1:14 in the morning, another text arrived. "You're really ending this over one request?" I stared at it for almost a minute before replying once. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. Then I silenced my phone and went to sleep. 4 days later, the next messages didn't come from Caleb. They came from his mother, his older sister, even one of his female friends I'd met maybe twice. Same accusations every single time. Cold.
Cruel. Controlling.
One message actually said, a real woman would put her future husband first. Like I was failing some kind of femininity exam. Caleb finally texted asking if we could talk like adults. So we met at a coffee shop downtown. He arrived looking exhausted on purpose. Red eyes, messy hair, vulnerable posture. At first, his voice sounded soft. I shouldn't have said it like that.
I nodded slowly.
Okay. Then came the pivot. But I sacrificed things too, Audrey, he said. I gave up my apartment. I built my future around you. You gave up a $1,350 studio apartment, I replied calmly, and moved into a townhouse I already own. His jaw tightened immediately. I thought we were building something together. We were, I said quietly, until you turned my home into a test. Then he tried presenting another compromise. Fine, he said, not now. Put me on the deed after the wedding, immediately after. I actually laughed once under my breath, because I finally understood there would never be enough reassurance for someone seeking control. Caleb, I said gently, you don't get to threaten me and then negotiate ownership of my life afterward. His eyes flashed. So I'm just supposed to feel insecure forever? I offered prenups, wills, shared assets. You don't want security. I leaned back slightly. You want leverage. That one landed hard. He went silent. Then, almost impressively fast, tears filled his eyes. Real tears, maybe. Or practiced ones. I honestly still don't know. He reached for my hand across the table. Audrey, please, I was scared. I pulled my hand back carefully. Fear doesn't justify manipulation. Then I laid out logistics calmly. Pickup would happen Wednesday. I'd forward his mail for 60 days. I'd return the engagement ring once he returned my grandmother's watch he'd borrowed at Christmas and conveniently forgotten to give back. His entire demeanor changed instantly. So now you're holding the ring hostage? I'm asking for my grandmother's property back. You're unbelievable. No, I said quietly. I'm finally paying attention. 2 hours later, he sent me a Venmo request for $9,800, labeled Home Equity plus Emotional Labor. I stared at it. Then, to my own surprise, I laughed. A real laugh. The first one in weeks. That same night, my doorbell camera sent me a notification. Caleb, using his old key, walking directly into my townhouse. He stayed exactly 8 minutes. Before leaving, he looked directly into the camera lens for several long seconds. Like he was daring me to react emotionally. Instead, I called a locksmith the next morning. New locks cost me $165. Peace of mind was priceless. When Caleb found out, he texted immediately. That's illegal. I replied once. Pickup is Wednesday. Bring someone with you. No drama. Later that night, his father called me unexpectedly. His voice sounded tired. Did Caleb really say that about the townhouse? Yes, I answered quietly. A long silence followed. Then he sighed heavily. I'm sorry, Audrey. That wasn't okay. It was the first sane thing anyone connected to Caleb had said to me in days. And somehow that made me sadder than everything else combined. Wednesday should have been the ending. That was the lie I told myself all morning while standing in my kitchen, staring at neatly stacked boxes beside the wall. Everything was organized carefully, jackets folded, electronics wrapped safely, bathroom products sealed in plastic bags so nothing spilled during transport. I even labeled the boxes in black marker, because some stubborn part of me still believed kindness and order could prevent chaos. Vanessa came over before Caleb arrived. Not because I was afraid of him exactly, but because I no longer trusted him to behave predictably. There's a difference. At 2:17 in the afternoon, Caleb pulled into the driveway with his older sister Miranda in the passenger seat. She climbed out first, wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy weather, immediately scanning the townhouse like she was arriving for an inspection instead of a breakup pickup. Caleb barely looked at me when he walked inside. His silence felt theatrical. Miranda's silence felt strategic. For the first few minutes, everything stayed unnervingly calm. Caleb opened boxes slowly, while Miranda hovered nearby, making tiny comments under her breath. This doesn't look like all his stuff. I think there were more sweaters. Didn't he have another watch? Every accusation stayed vague enough to avoid direct confrontation while still planting tension in the room. I stood near the kitchen counter with my arms folded tightly across my chest, trying not to react. Then, Caleb pulled several folded documents from his backpack and slid them across the island toward me. At first, I honestly thought they were reimbursement receipts. They weren't. Quitclaim paperwork. Property transfer documents. I stared at him in disbelief. You brought legal paperwork to your move-out day? It's a reset, he said calmly. You don't have to transfer ownership completely. Just add me. Miranda nodded immediately beside him. It would show commitment. I looked from one face to the other and suddenly understood something horrifying. They genuinely believed persistence would wear me down eventually. That this was still negotiable. No, I said flatly, pushing the paperwork back toward him. Caleb's expression hardened instantly. You're humiliating me. No, I said quietly. I'm refusing manipulation. His jaw flexed sharply. You're going to regret this, Audrey. The temperature in the room changed when he said that. Even Vanessa noticed it. She stepped slightly closer beside me without speaking. Caleb grabbed the paperwork aggressively, stuffed it back into his bag, and spent the next 20 minutes moving through the townhouse with this cold, simmering anger radiating from him like heat from an open oven. Before leaving, Miranda paused near the front door and gave me a long look. You know, she said softly, sometimes women sabotage good men because they're scared of real commitment. I almost laughed. Instead, I opened the door wider. Drive safely. They left furious because I refused to perform emotionally for them. That was the beginning of the escalation. 2 days later, my boss forwarded me an email with the subject line, ethics concern. Anonymous Gmail address. No signature. The message accused me of financial dishonesty, workplace misconduct, and hiding assets from my fiancé while using company time to manage real estate investments. I sat frozen at my desk, reading it twice. Then a third time. Not because I believed it would damage my career, but because I realized Caleb wanted consequences now. Punishment. My boss, Daniel, called me into his office 15 minutes later. He shut the door gently before speaking. Everything okay? I appreciated him immediately for asking like a human being instead of an employer. So I told him the truth. Not every detail. Just enough. I showed him screenshots of Caleb's ultimatum texts and explained the breakup briefly. Daniel read them silently before exhaling through his nose. Well, he muttered, that explains the tone of the email. HR blocked the sender immediately. Security quietly flagged Caleb's name and photo just in case. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt exhausted, because every boundary I set seemed to provoke him further. 3 days later, my neighbor Olivia texted me while I was at work. Hey, random question, why is there a locksmith at your house? My stomach dropped instantly. I called the number immediately. "There's a guy here saying his fiancée locked him out of their shared home," Olivia explained. "He's trying to get the locks changed." Caleb. Of course it was Caleb. I contacted the locksmith company directly while sitting in the office stairwell, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles hurt. The moment I explained the mortgage and deed were solely under my name, the manager sounded deeply annoyed. "We're leaving immediately," he assured me. Apparently, Caleb had conveniently left out certain details. That night, I sat alone on my couch, staring at the security camera footage replaying across my phone. Watching him attempt to reclaim access to the townhouse felt surreal. Not heartbreaking anymore. Just deeply unsettling. Like discovering someone had been wearing a mask longer than you realized. At 2:06 in the morning the next day, another text arrived from a random number. "I might have gotten someone pregnant. I'm at urgent care. Please answer." I stared at the message in the darkness for almost a full minute. Then I slowly sat upright in bed, because something about the wording felt calculated. We hadn't even been intimate in over a month. Every interaction near the end of the relationship had become tense, cold, emotionally exhausting. The timing wasn't accidental. He wanted panic, fear.
Reaction.
Instead, I typed one sentence: "Do not contact me again." Then I blocked the number. By that weekend, things became genuinely frightening. At 9:40 that Saturday night, my doorbell camera alerted me again. Caleb stood outside the townhouse, pounding on the front door. At first, his voice sounded soft. "Audrey, please talk to me." Then angry. "You can't ignore me forever." Then tearful. Then threatening. The emotional switching happened so quickly it made my skin crawl. I stayed upstairs in my bedroom, watching through the app with all the lights off. Vanessa was on speakerphone whispering, "Call the police." I hesitated too long. Then Caleb shouted something that finally snapped me into motion. "Open the damn door, or I'll tell the cops you stole my property." So I called first. Not 911. The non-emergency line. My voice sounded strangely calm while explaining the situation. When the responding officer arrived, Caleb immediately shifted personas again. Suddenly, he looked wounded instead of aggressive. "She's emotionally abusive," he said loudly while gesturing toward the house. "She changed the locks and stole my belongings." The officer glanced at me, standing silently near the doorway. Then he asked one simple question. "Is your name on the mortgage or deed, sir?" Caleb hesitated. "No, but..." That was enough. I showed the officer the security footage from earlier that night. The yelling, the threats, the pounding, everything. The officer watched quietly before turning back toward Caleb. "Sir," he said firmly, "you need to leave the property immediately." Caleb looked stunned. Like consequences genuinely surprised him. "She's twisting things." "No," the officer replied evenly. "She's documenting things." That sentence stayed with me for weeks, because it perfectly explained why Caleb hated my calmness so much. Documentation removes room for emotional distortion. Monday morning, I hired an attorney. $1,500 retainer. Worth every cent. Her name was Rebecca Sloan, and within 20 minutes of meeting her, I finally stopped feeling crazy. Rebecca reviewed the texts, the security footage, the fake workplace complaint, the locksmith situation, and the repeated contact attempts. Then she looked up calmly and said, "You're dealing with escalation because he lost control of the narrative."
Narrative.
Not love. Not heartbreak.
Narrative.
She immediately sent Caleb a formal cease and desist notice, demanding zero further contact. For a few days, things became quiet. Too quiet. Then, the third-party messages started. A mutual friend texted me saying Caleb claimed I was withholding his property to punish him. Another acquaintance accused me of overreacting. Miranda left me a voicemail calling me narcissistic and emotionally stunted. Someone else messaged me on Instagram saying Caleb was spiraling because he loved me too much. Loved me too much. It amazed me how often manipulation gets romanticized when the manipulator sounds sad enough. I stopped replying entirely. Instead, I saved everything. Screenshots, voicemails, call log, dates, times. Rebecca said something during one of our meetings that changed how I viewed the situation. Proof turns chaos into math. And she was right. Because once I stopped emotionally interpreting Caleb's behavior and started documenting it objectively, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, something strange started happening. My life improved. Quietly. Slowly. I started sleeping through the night again. Food tasted normal again. I stopped jumping every time my phone vibrated. At work, Daniel promoted me to lead a major development project after a client presentation went unexpectedly well. "You don't wobble under pressure," he told me afterward. If only he knew how much Caleb hated that exact quality in me. Because the calmer I became, the more unstable he seemed to grow. And deep down, I think that terrified him. 2 months after the breakup, Caleb still refused to accept that the relationship was over. Not emotionally over. Legally over.
Completely over.
That distinction mattered. Because heartbreak eventually fades for most people. Control doesn't. By then, Rebecca's cease and desist letter had already been ignored multiple times. First came the handwritten note tucked beneath my windshield wiper while I was inside a grocery store for maybe 12 minutes. "I miss who we used to be." No signature. No threat. Just enough emotional bait to force engagement. Then, flowers arrived at my office reception desk 3 days later. White roses, my favorites, which somehow made it feel worse. The card read, "We can still fix this if you stop being stubborn." The receptionist handed them to me carefully, like she sensed something strange underneath the gesture. I threw them away, unopened, in the break room trash. The next contact came from another new number around midnight. "I know you still love me." Blocked. Then came the indirect pressure campaigns again. His cousin Jenna messaged me on Facebook, insisting Caleb had changed. One of his coworkers sent me a paragraph on Instagram accusing me of being emotionally cold and terrified of commitment. Even Miranda reappeared through a mutual friend, claiming Caleb was in therapy now and simply wanted one final conversation for closure. Closure. That word became another weapon. Because people like Caleb don't actually want closure. They want continued access. They want the door cracked open just enough to keep pulling on it. Rebecca agreed immediately. "He's testing boundaries," she told me during our next meeting, "and he's escalating every time silence doesn't work." So we filed for a protection order. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late February. I barely slept the night before. Not because I doubted myself, because I hated what my life had become. Folders. Evidence. Timelines. Police reports. Screenshots. There's something deeply painful about reducing a relationship to documentation, like translating years of intimacy into legal exhibits. Still, by 8:30 that morning, I sat inside the courthouse holding a thick folder containing every single contact attempt Caleb had made after being told to stop. Texts. Doorbell footage. Anonymous workplace complaints. Call log. Voicemails.
Photographs.
Rebecca called it overwhelming documentation. I called it survival. When Caleb entered the courtroom, I almost didn't recognize him. Gone were the emotional outbursts. Gone was the anger. He wore a neutral gray sweater with dark slacks. His hair was neatly combed back. His expression looked subdued, exhausted, almost fragile, carefully constructed, like he'd researched how remorse should appear. For one dangerous second, I saw the man I originally fell in love with. And that hurt more than the harassment ever did. Because grief becomes complicated when the person harming you still occasionally resembles the person who once comforted you. Caleb glanced toward me only once before sitting beside his attorney. He looked sad. Not guilty. Not accountable. Sad. The hearing itself lasted less than 40 minutes. His lawyer tried framing everything as emotional confusion after a painful breakup. "He simply wanted closure," she explained gently to the judge. "Mr. Mercer never intended harm." Rebecca didn't even react emotionally. She simply handed over the timeline. One contact after another.
Repeated violations.
Third-party pressure. Late-night appearances at my home. Threats involving police. Anonymous workplace complaints. Documented evidence leaves very little room for performance. The judge spent several long minutes reading silently. Then he looked directly at Caleb. "Mr. Mercer," he said evenly, "closure is not legal justification for repeatedly contacting someone who has clearly instructed you to stop." The courtroom became painfully quiet. Caleb swallowed hard. His attorney tried interrupting, but the judge raised one hand, calmly. "No," he continued. "What concerns this court is the pattern. Multiple forms of contact, escalation after boundaries were established, attempts to involve employers and third parties." Then he turned toward me briefly. "Ms. Knight has demonstrated repeated efforts to disengage peacefully." Something inside my chest loosened hearing those words. Because for months, Caleb and everyone around him had treated my boundaries like cruelty. The judge granted the order immediately. 1 year, no contact. No third-party communication. No approaching my home or workplace within 300 feet. Any violation would carry criminal consequences. Just like that, it was official. Not emotional anymore. Legal.
Real.
Caleb's face changed for the first time then. Not rage. Not heartbreak.
Humiliation.
Because manipulative people often believe consequences are things that happen to other people. After the hearing, Rebecca coordinated the final exchange through legal offices, instead of allowing direct contact. I returned the engagement ring through Caleb's attorney. In return, I finally got my grandmother's watch back. No dramatic parking lot confrontation. No cinematic goodbye. Just signatures on a receipt. Honestly, the lack of drama felt almost surreal after everything we'd been through. But peace usually arrives quietly. 2 weeks later, several friends sent me screenshots of a long social media post Caleb made about surviving financial abuse and narcissistic control. Apparently, I was now the villain in his healing journey. I read exactly half of it before closing the app. Then I blocked his account permanently. Not out of anger. Out of exhaustion. Because eventually you realize defending yourself publicly keeps you emotionally connected to the very chaos you escaped. So I stopped participating entirely. And life slowly became ordinary again. I repainted the hallway Caleb once tried turning into some Pinterest-inspired luxury redesign project. Soft, warm white. Simple. Quiet. I sold leftover wedding decorations on Facebook Marketplace and used the money to buy tickets for Vanessa and me to attend a Denver Nuggets game downtown. For the first time in months, I laughed without forcing it. Real laughter. The kind that doesn't feel fragile afterward. Sometimes healing looks incredibly small from the outside. Sleeping through the night. Cooking dinner without anxiety. Walking into your own home without fear of conflict. Months later, I started dating again. Slowly.
Carefully.
His name was Ethan. He worked in environmental engineering, hated social media, and once made me laugh so hard at dinner I nearly choked on iced tea. One night, after hearing a simplified version of my breakup story, he shook his head and said, "You know, a trust test should involve checking smoke alarms, not emotionally blackmailing your partner." I laughed so unexpectedly hard that people at nearby tables turned to look at us. And in that moment, I realized something important. Healthy love feels calm. Not performative. Not conditional. Not like you're constantly preparing for another emotional exam. Looking back now, I think the relationship really ended the moment Caleb called manipulation a trust test. Because love stops being love the second it becomes leverage. And the strangest part? The chaos only disappeared after I stopped negotiating with it. The moment I believed his actions instead of his excuses. Everything became clear. My name is Daphne Sterling. I'm 29 years old, and for the longest time, I thought love was supposed to feel confusing. Not painful exactly, just uncertain. Like constantly trying to decode someone's eyes, their pauses, the way their voice softened only around you. Like convincing yourself that mixed signals meant hidden feelings instead of hesitation. That was before Ethan. Or maybe more accurately, before I finally understood Ethan. We met 3 years ago through mutual friends at a rooftop birthday party downtown. I remember almost leaving early because the music was terrible and somebody had spilled beer on my shoes. Ethan was standing near the edge of the balcony making sarcastic comments about the playlist under his breath. And somehow, we spent the next 2 hours talking like we already knew each other. He had this calm energy about him. Not loud, not flashy. The kind of man who listened carefully before speaking. He made people feel seen without trying too hard. At first, we were just friends. Normal friends. Group dinners, movie nights, sending each other ridiculous memes at 2 a.m, complaining about work, sharing coffee runs. Nothing dramatic. But emotional intimacy never announces itself when it arrives. It sneaks in quietly, until suddenly, someone matters too much. The calls got longer first. Then, more personal. Ethan started telling me things he apparently didn't tell anyone else. Stories about his ex-girlfriend, Claire. How she constantly made him feel like he was never enough. How exhausting it felt trying to keep someone happy when they only loved you conditionally. Sometimes he'd go silent during those conversations, and I'd stay on the phone anyway, just listening to him breathe. "You always make me feel calmer," he told me once around midnight. I remember staring at my ceiling afterward, replaying that sentence like it meant something larger. Maybe that was my mistake. Not believing him, but believing too much. There were all these tiny moments that kept hope alive, the kind that blur lines until friendship starts looking dangerously close to love. He'd brush my hair away from my face absent-mindedly while talking. He'd text me good morning for no reason. When we watched movies at his apartment, he always sat close enough that our knees touched. Sometimes he'd fall asleep beside me on the couch, without moving away. Once, while helping me choose a dress for a coworker's event, he stared a little too long before quietly saying, "You look beautiful in that color." Beautiful. Not pretty. Not nice. Beautiful. That single word stayed in my chest for weeks. People think emotional confusion comes from delusion. It doesn't. It comes from consistency. From someone giving you just enough intimacy to keep your heart invested while never fully claiming you. That's how you end up trapped. Not because you're stupid, because hope slowly becomes part of your routine. One rainy Thursday night, everything finally tipped over the edge. I was at Ethan's apartment. We were halfway through some old indie film neither of us cared about. The lights were dim, except for the television flickering softly across the room. He'd had a terrible week. His boss humiliated him during a meeting. His ex-girlfriend had posted photos online with someone new. He kept pretending it didn't bother him, but I could see it all over his face. That exhausted sadness people carry when they don't want to admit they're hurting. Halfway through the movie, he shifted closer to me. "I'm tired," he murmured quietly. Without thinking, I rested my head lightly against his shoulder. He didn't move away. The silence between us felt warm, intimate, small in the best way, like the entire world had narrowed down to one couch, one heartbeat, one impossible moment. Then he turned his head slightly and looked at me. Too long. Way too long for just friends. My heart started pounding so hard I could barely hear the movie anymore. For once, I stopped overthinking everything. I stopped analyzing signals. I stopped trying to protect myself from embarrassment. I just leaned in slowly toward him. Not dramatic. Not reckless. Just enough to meet him halfway. But he froze. I felt it instantly. That hesitation. That subtle withdrawal. Then came the smile.
Soft. Careful. Sympathetic.
The kind of smile people use when they think they're sparing your feelings. "Daphne," he said gently, "let's not ruin the friendship, okay? It's strange how one sentence can hollow you out instantly."
Ruin.
That word hit me hardest. Like my feelings were something dangerous, something destructive. My chest felt tight so suddenly I thought I might actually cry right there in front of him. I could have said so many things. I could have asked why he blurred boundaries for months. Why he held me like I already belonged to him. Why he leaned on me emotionally like I was his partner whenever life hurt him. I could have asked why he looked at me that way if friendship was all he wanted. But heartbreak does something strange sometimes. It makes you calm. Okay, I said quietly. His eyebrows lifted slightly, like he expected resistance. You're not upset? He asked. You were honest, I replied. That matters. I stood up and grabbed my jacket from the chair nearby. He looked uncomfortable suddenly, almost disappointed. You don't have to make things weird, he said carefully. I'm not, I answered. I'm just adjusting. That word seemed to affect him more than I expected. Adjusting. Like something had already changed between us. I gave him a tired smile and headed toward the door. Good night, Ethan. Good night, he said softly. The walk home felt surreal. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Quiet heartbreak rarely looks cinematic. Usually it just feels empty, like someone slowly drained all the sound out of the world. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. Ethan. Hey, I really care about you. Don't disappear on me because of this. I stared at the screen for a long time, then locked my phone without replying. Not because I wanted revenge, because for the first time, I actually believed him. He did care about me, just not enough. That night changed something fundamental inside me. The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely clear-headed, still hurt, still embarrassed, but clear, like I'd spent years staring through fog, only for someone to finally wipe the glass clean. I didn't block Ethan. I didn't make dramatic speeches. I didn't announce boundaries or post sad quotes online. I simply stopped centering him. At first, he didn't notice. Our conversations became shorter naturally. I stopped initiating calls. I stopped sending him random updates throughout the day. I stopped dropping everything whenever he needed emotional support. When he vented about work, I listened politely instead of spending hours reassuring him. When he texted late at night, I responded the next morning. When he sent memes, I reacted with simple emojis instead of dragging conversations out for hours. I slowly became exactly what he claimed he wanted. A friend. After about 2 weeks, he finally noticed. You've been distant lately, he said one night during a phone call. Have I? I asked calmly. Yes. I leaned against my kitchen counter quietly. I've just been busy. There was no accusation in my voice. No bitterness. And somehow, that seemed to bother him more. Because emotional withdrawal without drama leaves people nothing to fight against. At first, Ethan treated it like a temporary mood. He sent old inside jokes, selfies, random memories, tiny attempts to recreate the closeness we used to have. I responded politely, never warmly. The difference between heartbreak and healing is repetition. One keeps reopening the wound, the other quietly stops feeding it. A few days later, he invited me to brunch. Just friends, he added jokingly, like he needed to remind both of us. I arrived 15 minutes late. Not intentionally. I just stopped organizing my life around him. When I walked into the cafe, Ethan looked up immediately. His expression changed the second he saw me. Not because I looked different, because I didn't look nervous anymore. I ordered coffee before sitting down. He watched me carefully. You seem different, he finally said. Maybe I am. He laughed awkwardly. That sounds ominous. It's not. But he kept studying me throughout brunch, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Maybe because I wasn't leaning toward him emotionally anymore. Maybe because I wasn't trying so hard to impress him. Or maybe because for the first time since meeting me, he couldn't fully feel my devotion surrounding him anymore. After brunch, he hugged me goodbye. Longer than necessary. Before, I would have melted into that hug. This time, I simply let it happen. No tightening my arms around him. No lingering. No silent wishing. When he pulled away, his forehead creased slightly. You're cold lately, he said. I shook my head softly. No, I replied. I'm just consistent. He stared at me like he didn't know what that meant. Maybe because consistency feels very different once someone stops giving you unconditional emotional access. Over the following weeks, our friendship became exactly what Ethan asked for.
Casual.
Normal.
Ordinary.
He'd text me and I'd respond hours later. He'd invite me somewhere, and sometimes I already had plans. Real plans. Not fake excuses. I started going to the gym again. I reconnected with coworkers I'd been neglecting. I took short weekend trips. I started rebuilding pieces of my life I didn't realize I'd abandoned while emotionally orbiting someone who never fully chose me. And the less available I became, the more Ethan started reaching for me. One Friday evening, he showed up at my apartment carrying takeout containers like it was still our old routine. I was already dressed to leave. His expression shifted instantly. "You're going out?" "Yeah," I said while grabbing my bag. "Meeting some people." He forced a smile. "Anyone I know?" "No." There was something sharp underneath his calmness suddenly. As I stepped past him, he spoke again. "You don't talk to me like you used to." I turned toward him slowly, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. This wasn't confusion anymore. This was discomfort. Loss. "You told me we were better as friends," I said evenly. "So I'm being your friend." His face tightened. "That's not what I meant." "But it's what you said." The silence between us felt heavier than either of us expected. And somewhere deep down, I think that was the exact moment Ethan began realizing he might have made a mistake. That night, after Ethan left my apartment doorway with the takeout still in his hands, he sent me a long message. Not an apology. Not really. More like sadness dressed up as confusion. "I miss us. I hate how weird things feel now. You used to be my safest person. I don't know what happened." I read it twice. Then I put my phone face down on the table. Because I knew exactly what happened. I had stopped auditioning for a role he never planned to give me. The next morning, I replied with one sentence. Things change when boundaries become real. He didn't answer for hours. Then he wrote back. That feels unfair. Maybe it was. But so was being loved halfway. Over the next few weeks, Ethan started trying harder. Not openly at first. He was too proud for that. His efforts came wrapped in casualness, like he could pretend he wasn't reaching. He sent me old photos from nights we'd spent laughing in diners after everyone else went home. "Remember this?" He tagged me in stupid videos that used to make me respond instantly. He messaged me during lunch breaks. He asked if I wanted to come over and watch movies. Every invitation carried an invisible question underneath it. Are you still mine in the ways that matter? But I wasn't. Not anymore. I responded when I had time. I smiled when something was funny. I showed up occasionally, but I stopped making him the center of my emotional schedule. That was the part he couldn't understand. He wanted friendship, but he wanted the premium version. The late-night therapy. The soft voice. The constant reassurance. The woman who could be rejected romantically and still remain emotionally devoted. I couldn't be that woman anymore. And the more I refused to become her again, the more restless Ethan became. It started with midnight texts. "You awake?" "Can't sleep." "Miss talking to you." At first, I ignored them. Not because I hated him, because answering would have been a door, and I knew exactly where that door led. One night, he called. I watched his name glow across my phone screen until it disappeared. Then he called again. And again. Finally, I answered. "Everything okay?" I asked. There was a pause. "Yeah," he said quickly. "I just couldn't sleep." "Then you should try." Another pause. A longer one. "You really don't care anymore, do you?" His voice was quiet, but there was accusation hidden inside it. I sat up in bed and stared at the dark window across from me. "I care," I said, "but not like that." The line went silent. For a second, I heard his breathing change. Then he gave a small, humorless laugh. "Right. Ethan." "No, I get it," he said, even though he didn't. "Good night, Daphne." He hung up first. That was the first real crack. After that, he began appearing in places that used to belong to my routine. A coffee shop near my office. The Sunday farmer's market. A bookstore I'd mentioned once, months ago. Every time, he acted surprised. "Oh wow, you come here too?" The first time, I almost believed it. The second time, I didn't. At the coffee shop, he stood beside my table holding an untouched latte, smiling like coincidence had arranged everything. "I didn't know you came here," he said. "I've been coming here for 2 years. His smile flickered. "Oh, guess I forgot." That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because he forgot the cafe, because I suddenly realized how much of me he never actually noticed unless it served him. We made small talk.
Polite. Shallow.
Safe. He asked about work. I answered briefly. I asked about his project. He complained for a few minutes, then stopped when he realized I wasn't soothing him the way I used to. When I stood to leave, his hand moved slightly toward mine, then dropped. "Daphne," he said, "we're okay, right?" I adjusted my bag on my shoulder. "We're fine." "I feel like you're mad at me." "I'm not." "Then why does it feel like I lost you?" There it was. The first honest thing he'd said in weeks. I looked at him for a moment. "Because I stopped waiting." His expression faltered. "I never asked you to wait." "No," I said softly. "You just enjoyed it when I did." Then I left. For the rest of that day, my chest felt heavy, but not broken. There's a difference. Pain can exist without controlling you. Missing someone doesn't mean you should go back. I kept reminding myself of that. Then Lucas entered the picture. Lucas wasn't dramatic. He wasn't mysterious. He worked in another department at my company, and we first talked properly during a team lunch when he made a dry comment about corporate icebreakers that made me choke on my water. He was easy to be around. That was what struck me first. No guessing. No emotional puzzles. If he wanted to talk to me, he talked to me. If he liked something about me, he said it clearly. "You have a really sharp way of seeing people," he told me once after a meeting. I waited for the teasing, the retreat, the softening into ambiguity. It never came. He just meant it. That kind of honesty felt almost unfamiliar. We started having coffee together after work sometimes, then lunch, then walks around the block when the office got suffocating. I didn't tell Ethan much about Lucas. I didn't need to. But Ethan noticed anyway. At a mutual friend's game night, Lucas came with a few coworkers. He and I ended up talking in the kitchen for nearly 20 minutes about movies, bad bosses, and the strange pressure people feel to pretend they're fine. When I laughed at something Lucas said, I felt someone watching me. I turned slightly. Ethan was across the room, holding a drink he hadn't touched. His expression was careful. Too careful. Later that night, my phone buzzed. "So, who's Lucas?" I stared at the message for a second before replying. "A friend." Ethan answered almost immediately. "You two seemed close." "He's nice." "Nice?" I could almost hear the jealousy through the screen. I typed back slowly. "Yes, Ethan, nice." He left me on red for the rest of the night. The next day, he called. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Can we talk?" he asked. "We are talking." He sighed. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Act like I'm bothering you." I stayed quiet. He exhaled again. "Everything feels weird now." "It feels weird because the dynamic changed." "No," he said quickly. "It feels weird because you changed." That almost made me laugh. I did. "You say that like it's nothing." "It's not nothing. It's growth." He was silent for a moment. Then, softer, he said, "I miss how you used to look at me." The words hit somewhere deep, because part of me remembered. The old Daphne would have folded at that sentence. She would have heard vulnerability and mistaken it for love. She would have rushed to comfort him for grieving the attention he lost. But I wasn't her anymore. "You can't miss something you refused to choose," I said. His breath caught. "That's harsh." "It's true." "I was scared," he said. "Of what?" "Of losing the friendship." "You lost it anyway," I replied quietly. "You just didn't realize friendship without emotional dependence would feel different." He didn't answer. Then his voice changed, sharper now. "So what, Lucas gets the new version of you?" I closed my eyes. There it was. Not love.
Territory.
"Lucas gets whatever I choose to give him," I said. "That has nothing to do with you." "It feels like it does." "That's because you were comfortable when I had no one else to give my attention to." The silence after that was icy. "You really think that low of me?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'm finally thinking clearly about us." He hung up without saying goodbye. After that, Ethan's efforts became less subtle. He started commenting under my posts again. Not flirty exactly, just visible. Inside jokes. Old references. Things designed to remind people that he knew me first. At group gatherings, he positioned himself near me. He interrupted conversations. He asked questions about Lucas with a smile that never reached his eyes. Once, when Lucas walked away to take a call, Ethan leaned beside me and said, "He seems very polished." I looked at him. "That's not an insult." "I didn't say it was." "You meant it like one." He gave a small shrug. "I just hope he's genuine." The irony almost made me dizzy. "Ethan," I said calmly, "you don't get to interview people for a place in my life." His jaw tightened. "I'm just looking out for you." "No," I said, "you're checking whether I'm still available." His eyes flashed. "That's unfair." "So you keep saying." For a moment, he looked like he might say something honest. Instead, he stepped back. "Forget it." But he didn't forget it. He couldn't. The more stable I became, the more unsteady he got. He began sending voice notes late at night and deleting them before I could listen. He posted vague captions about people changing. He liked old photos of us from years ago. One evening, he sent me a picture from a trip our friend group had taken to the lake. In it, I was laughing at something off camera while Ethan looked at me instead of the view. Remember when things were easy? I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I answered. They weren't easy. I was just quiet about what hurt. He didn't reply. A week later, he showed up outside my gym. That one almost made me angry. I stepped out into the cold evening air and saw him leaning against his car like he had just happened to be nearby. "Daphne," he said, straightening. I took one earbud out. "Coincidence?" He looked embarrassed for half a second. "I wanted to see you." "Then say that." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I wanted to see you." There was something raw in his voice. For a second, I saw the man I used to love beneath all the pride and confusion. But seeing him clearly didn't mean going back. "What do you want, Ethan?" He swallowed. "I don't know." That's always been the problem. His face tightened. "I'm trying." "No," I said softly. "You're reacting." "That's not fair. You keep using that word whenever the truth makes you uncomfortable." He looked away. Cars moved slowly through the parking lot behind him. The gym lights buzzed overhead. Everything felt too ordinary for a conversation that would have once shattered me. Finally, he said, "I don't like seeing you with him." "Lucas?" His mouth tightened at the name. "Yes." "Why?" He looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time, he didn't hide behind jokes. "Because you used to look at me that way." My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "I know. I miss it." "You miss being wanted." His eyes softened with pain. "Is that so terrible?" "No," I said, "but it's not the same as wanting me back." He stepped closer. "What if I do?" For one dangerous second, everything inside me went still. The old hope stirred, like something not fully dead. But then, I remembered the couch. The word ruin. The weeks of silence. The way he only reached when I was walking away. So I asked the one question that mattered. "Do you want me, Ethan? Or do you want access to the version of me who made you feel loved without asking for anything?" His face changed. Not because he didn't understand. Because he did. And he didn't have an answer. That silence gave me mine. I put my earbud back in and walked toward my car. Behind me, he called my name once. I didn't turn around. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop explaining your worth to someone who only recognizes it when someone else might value it. That night, Ethan sent one message. "I think I made a mistake." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I typed back. "I know." And for the first time, I didn't feel cruel. I felt free. After Ethan admitted he made a mistake, things between us shifted again. Not back toward romance. Toward regret. Real regret has a different energy than jealousy. Jealousy is sharp and reactive. Regret is slower, heavier. It settles into someone's voice until even their confidence sounds tired. For weeks after that message, Ethan kept reaching for me in ways that felt increasingly desperate. Long texts. Random check-ins. Excuses to call. He asked questions he already knew the answers to, just to keep conversations alive longer. At first, I answered occasionally out of habit. Then less. Then, barely at all. Not because I was playing games. Because every interaction reminded me how emotionally uneven we had always been. I had loved him with clarity. He had loved my presence. Those aren't the same thing. One Friday night, I came home late after dinner with Lucas and found Ethan sitting inside his car outside my apartment building. The moment I saw him, my stomach dropped. Not from excitement. From exhaustion. He stepped out quickly when he noticed me. "Daphne, what are you doing here?" He gave a nervous laugh. "I was nearby. You live 40 minutes away." His shoulders sagged slightly. "Okay, I wanted to talk." I tightened my grip on my keys. "It's almost midnight." "I know." "You could have called." "You don't answer anymore." The honesty in that sentence caught me off guard. For a second, neither of us spoke. The city lights reflected faintly against the wet pavement around us. Somewhere nearby, music drifted from an apartment window upstairs. The world kept moving, while we stood there trapped inside something that should have ended months ago. Finally, Ethan spoke again. "I miss you." I looked at him carefully. The old version of me would have melted hearing that. But healing changes the emotional weight of certain words. Once you stop starving for validation, confessions lose some of their power. "You miss access to me," I said quietly. His face tightened instantly. "Why do you keep saying that?" "Because every time I stopped revolving around you, suddenly you panicked." "That's not fair." I almost smiled sadly. "There's that word again." He looked away, frustrated. "I didn't know how important you were to me." "No," I corrected gently. "You didn't think I'd ever leave, emotionally." That hit him hard. I saw it immediately. His jaw flexed, his eyes dropped to the ground. "You really think I'm that selfish?" "I think you got comfortable." The silence stretched painfully between us. Then he finally admitted it. "I thought you'd always be there." Something inside me went completely still hearing those words. Not because they hurt. Because they confirmed everything I already knew. He continued before I could answer. "You were always the safe person. No matter how stressed I got or how messy life became, you were just..." He swallowed hard. "There." I stared at him quietly. "And what was I supposed to do with that?" I asked softly. "Stay emotionally loyal to someone who kept me close while refusing to choose me? That's not what I was doing." "It is." "No," he insisted. "I was confused." I laughed once under my breath. Confused people don't accidentally build emotional dependence with someone for 3 years. His expression cracked slightly. "You make me sound manipulative. I think you liked being loved without responsibility." That sentence landed like a slap. He looked physically wounded by it. But instead of arguing, he whispered, "Maybe I did." That honesty almost hurt more than denial. For a brief second, I saw how lost he actually was beneath all his pride. Then he stepped closer. "I know I messed up, Daphne." I stayed silent. "I know I hurt you." Still silence. "And I know you probably hate me." "I don't hate you." "Then why does it feel like you erased me?" That question lingered in the cold air between us. Because part of him genuinely believed my emotional boundaries were cruelty. I took a slow breath before answering. "I didn't erase you, Ethan. I stopped abandoning myself for you." His eyes immediately filled with emotion. That reaction surprised me. Not because he was crying. Because for the first time, I realized he truly never understood the emotional cost of loving him. "You really loved me that much?" he asked quietly. I almost laughed at the tragedy of it. 3 years. And he was only now asking that question. "Yes," I said softly. "I did." His composure finally broke. He rubbed both hands over his face and turned away for a second, like he couldn't bear hearing it out loud. "I was scared," he admitted. "Every relationship I've had turned toxic eventually. Claire manipulated everything. She made love feel exhausting. And with you?" He looked back at me helplessly. You felt safe. Safe wasn't enough? No, he whispered. At the time, I thought I needed excitement. There it was. The truth. Not confusion.
Immaturity.
He wanted emotional certainty from me while chasing emotional intensity elsewhere. And now that the chaos disappointed him, he wanted to come back to peace. But people aren't emotional waiting rooms. I dated someone after you pulled away, he admitted suddenly. I raised an eyebrow slightly. I figured. She was exciting at first. Confident, unpredictable. Everything felt intense all the time. And? His laugh sounded hollow. And then she spent 3 months making me feel small. I stayed quiet. You never made me feel that way, he said softly. No, I answered. I loved you. That sentence destroyed what little composure he had left. His eyes turned glassy immediately. I didn't appreciate you enough. I know. The simplicity of my answer seemed to crush him more than anger would have. You're so calm now, he whispered. You used to care so much. I still care. Then why does it feel like I'm talking to a stranger? Because love finally stopped controlling me. But I didn't say that aloud. Instead, I looked at him carefully and asked, Do you know what the hardest part was? He shook his head slowly. Watching you enjoy being emotionally close to me while making sure I never expected more. His face fell completely. I never wanted to hurt you. I believe that. Then why does it sound like you're blaming me for everything? I'm not blaming you, I said gently. I'm accepting reality. That silence afterward felt devastating. Not dramatic. Just painfully honest. Finally, Ethan spoke again. Do you love him? The question caught me off guard. Lucas? He nodded once. I thought about it carefully before answering. I'm starting to. His eyes closed briefly. That hurt him. Really hurt him. You look happier lately, he said quietly. I am. With him? With myself. That answer seemed to break something inside him. Because deep down, Ethan understood the implication. I hadn't healed because another man rescued me. I healed because I finally stopped measuring my worth through someone else's hesitation. You know what the worst part is? He asked suddenly. What? I think I assumed you'd wait forever. There it was again. That belief. That certainty. Like my love had existed without limits, while his choices existed without consequences. That was your mistake, I said softly. He nodded slowly, like he finally understood. Then came the anger. Not explosive anger. Wounded anger. The kind people reach for when guilt becomes unbearable. So what now? He asked bitterly. I'm just supposed to watch you move on? I looked at him carefully. You already watched me suffer. That's different. No, I said quietly. It isn't. He exhaled sharply and looked away again. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he laughed bitterly under his breath. You know what's pathetic? He muttered. I waited. The second you stopped chasing me, suddenly I couldn't stop thinking about you. There was brutal honesty in that confession. But honesty arriving too late doesn't undo damage. You didn't fall in love with me when I pulled away, I said gently. You became afraid of losing access to my love. His eyes flashed with pain. You really believe that? Yes. Then why does this hurt so much? Because regret feels personal. That sentence silenced him completely. A car passed slowly behind us. Somewhere upstairs, someone laughed through an open balcony door. Life kept moving, while Ethan stood there realizing too late that the version of me he wanted no longer existed. Finally, he whispered, I don't know how to fix this. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I answered honestly, You can't. That truth settled heavily between us. He looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he asked quietly, Do you ever miss us? The question almost pulled me backward emotionally. Because yes, sometimes I missed the closeness, the routines, the late-night conversations, the version of myself that believed love would eventually be enough. But missing something doesn't mean it was healthy to stay inside it. I miss who I thought we were, I admitted softly. His eyes filled again. but I don't miss waiting for someone to choose me. The tears finally slipped down his face after that. Real tears. Not manipulative. Not performative. Just grief. And strangely enough, seeing him cry didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel sad. Because part of me would always love the version of Ethan that existed before disappointment hollowed everything out. But loving someone doesn't obligate you to stay emotionally available forever. Eventually, he wiped his face and stepped back. I don't think anyone's ever going to love me the way you did. That sentence almost shattered me. Not because I wanted him back. Because once upon a time, hearing him finally recognize my love would have meant everything to me. Now it just felt late. I hope someone does, I said quietly. His expression crumpled slightly. Then he gave a broken little nod. Good night, Daphne. Good night. He got back into his car and drove away slowly. I stood there for another minute, staring at the empty street afterward. And for the first time in years, I realized something important. Closure doesn't always feel victorious. Sometimes it just feels quiet. Like finally setting down something heavy you carried for too long. The silence after that night became permanent. Ethan still texted a few times afterward. Small things. Hopeful things. Saw something that reminded me of you. Hope work's going well. Miss talking to you. I didn't answer. Not because I hated him. Not because I wanted revenge. Because every conversation now felt like reopening a wound that had finally started healing correctly. And slowly, life stopped revolving around what almost happened between us. That was the strange part. I used to think heartbreak would always feel dramatic, that moving on would involve some huge emotional breakthrough. But healing turned out to be quieter than that. It looked like sleeping peacefully again, laughing without forcing it, going entire afternoons without checking my phone. It looked like building routines that belonged to me instead of waiting emotionally for someone else to choose me. Lucas became part of that peace naturally. There was no emotional chess game between us, no guessing, no disappearing and reappearing, no carefully rationed affection designed to keep me emotionally invested. If he missed me, he said it. If he wanted to see me, he asked. If something bothered him, we talked about it, instead of turning emotions into power struggles. The simplicity of that terrified me at first. Healthy love feels unfamiliar when you're used to uncertainty. One evening, a few months after my last real conversation with Ethan, Lucas and I were making dinner together at my apartment when he looked over at me and smiled softly. What? I asked. You look calmer lately. That sentence almost made me emotional. Because he was right. I was calmer. For years, loving Ethan felt like standing near the ocean during a storm. Beautiful sometimes, but exhausting. Constantly trying to predict emotional tides that changed without warning. With Lucas, things felt steady. Not boring. Safe. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood those two things were not the same. A month later, I heard through mutual friends that Ethan's relationship after me had ended badly. Apparently, the woman he dated ghosted him after weeks of emotional games and constant fighting. When I heard that, I didn't feel satisfaction, just sadness. Because pain has a way of teaching people lessons they refuse to learn gently. Then came the wedding. Our mutual friend Olivia had planned the entire thing obsessively for over a year, and somehow nearly everyone from our old social circle ended up there. Lucas came with me. I remember standing in front of the mirror before we left, adjusting an earring while nerves twisted unexpectedly in my stomach. You okay? Lucas asked from behind me. Yeah, I said after a second. Just weird seeing old people sometimes. He walked closer and rested his hands lightly on my waist. You don't owe your past version of yourself anything anymore. That sentence settled something deep inside me. At the wedding reception, everything felt warm and loud and golden. Music echoed across the ballroom while people drank too much champagne and pretended they weren't crying during speeches. For a while, I almost forgot Ethan might be there. Then I saw him. Across the room near the bar. And for one strange suspended second, it felt like looking at someone I used to know in another lifetime. He looked thinner. Quieter somehow. The effortless confidence he used to carry had faded around the edges. When his eyes landed on me, his entire expression changed. Not dramatically, just visibly. like seeing me hurt more than he expected. His gaze shifted toward Lucas standing beside me. Then back to me again. I felt strangely calm. Months ago, seeing Ethan would have ruined my entire evening emotionally. I would have spent hours overanalyzing every glance, every expression, every interaction. Now I just felt distant. Not cold. Finished. About 20 minutes later, while Lucas stepped away to grab drinks, Ethan approached me carefully. "Hey." His voice sounded softer than I remembered. "Hey." For a moment, neither of us knew what to say. "You look good," he finally said. "Thank you." There was another pause. "You seem happy." "I am." That answer visibly affected him. He glanced down briefly before forcing a small smile. "That's good." I studied him quietly, and suddenly I realized something painful. Ethan looked tired, in the way people do when regret becomes part of their personality. "You okay?" I asked gently. He laughed once under his breath. "That depends on the day." There was honesty in that answer. I probably would have appreciated months earlier. Now it just made me sad. His eyes drifted toward Lucas, returning from across the room carrying drinks. "So you two are serious?" "Yeah," I answered softly. "We are." He nodded slowly. "She seems good for you." "He is." The correction slipped out naturally. Ethan blinked once, then gave a small, embarrassed smile. "Right, he." For a second, I almost laughed. Then his expression shifted again. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think you were kind of boring." I stared at him. "You told me that once." "More than once," he admitted. There was shame all over his face now. I thought stability meant there was something missing. I kept confusing peace with boredom. I stayed silent. "And now?" I asked softly. His eyes met mine fully. "Now I think peace is probably the rarest thing in the world." That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted him back. Because part of me remembered how badly I once wanted him to understand that. "I'm sorry, Daphne." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable this time. No manipulation. No defensiveness. Just regret. "I know," I said gently. He swallowed hard. "No, I mean it. I really took you for granted." I nodded slightly. Then he asked the question I think had been haunting him for months. "Did you really love me that much?" I looked at him quietly. "Yes." His eyes immediately filled again. "And you really don't anymore?" That question lingered painfully between us. I thought carefully before answering. "Not in the way you mean." He looked down instantly, like even that softened answer hurt. Then he laughed bitterly under his breath. "I spent so much time thinking you'd always be there." "You already said that." "I know." He rubbed a hand over his face tiredly. "I just can't believe I was arrogant enough to think it." I understood what he meant. There's a certain kind of privilege in being loved deeply by someone emotionally loyal. After a while, you stop imagining life without their devotion because it becomes part of your environment, like air, like gravity, until suddenly, it's gone. "I think," Ethan said quietly, "I only realized what you meant to me once I couldn't reach you anymore." There it was again. That truth. Not love arriving too late. Value becoming visible only after loss. "You didn't want me when I was available," I said softly. "You wanted me once access stopped being guaranteed." He flinched slightly. "You always know exactly where to hurt me." "I'm not trying to hurt you." "I know," he smiled sadly. "That's the worst part." Lucas returned then and handed me a drink. Ethan straightened slightly, almost instinctively masking his emotions again. Lucas looked between us politely. "You okay here?" "Yeah," I said softly. Ethan extended a hand, awkwardly. "Ethan." "Lucas." They shook hands briefly, and suddenly the contrast between them became painfully obvious. Ethan felt emotionally unfinished. Lucas felt steady. Not because one man loved me more. Because one knew what he wanted before loss forced him to confront it. After a few moments, Lucas excused himself to greet someone nearby again. Ethan watched him walk away before speaking quietly. "He looks at you the way you used to look at me." That sentence almost cracked something open inside my chest. But only almost. He chooses me too, I answered. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Then he nodded. Yeah, he whispered. I guess that's the difference. The music shifted somewhere across the ballroom. Couples moved slowly across the dance floor beneath soft lights, while conversations blurred together around us. Everything felt strangely final. I really am sorry, he said again. This time, I smiled gently. I believe you. He looked surprised by that. You do? Yes. Then why does it still feel like I lost? Because apologies don't reverse timing. But I answered more softly than that. Because some people come into your life to teach you what love feels like, I said quietly. And some people come into your life to teach you what happens when you take it for granted. His eyes watered again. Which one was I? I looked at him for a long moment. Both. That silence afterward felt like goodbye. Not dramatic. Not angry. Just complete. Finally, Ethan smiled weakly. She's lucky to have you. I glanced toward Lucas, laughing with friends nearby. Then, back at Ethan. No, I said softly. We're lucky we found each other at the right time. He nodded slowly, like he understood exactly what I meant. And maybe he did. Because timing matters. Love without readiness becomes damage. Affection without clarity becomes confusion. And emotional safety means nothing if someone only values it after chaos hurts them first. A few minutes later, Lucas returned and gently reached for my hand. You ready to dance? I smiled. Yeah. As we walked toward the dance floor, I glanced back once. Ethan was still standing near the bar, watching us quietly. But for the first time in years, seeing him didn't fill me with longing. Only perspective. Later that night, during the drive home, Lucas reached across the center console and intertwined his fingers with mine. You okay? He asked softly. I looked out the window at the passing city lights. Then I smiled. Yeah, I answered honestly. I really am. Because the truth was simple in the end. Ethan didn't lose me the night he rejected me on that couch. He lost me slowly, every time he accepted my love without protecting it. Every time he enjoyed emotional closeness while avoiding emotional responsibility. Every time he assumed I would remain available no matter how uncertain he stayed. And eventually, I stopped waiting. That was the real ending. Not revenge. Not anger. Freedom. Here's what I learned from all of it. Mixed signals are still answers. If someone wants the benefits of your love without committing to you fully, distance is not cruelty. It's self-respect. You can respect someone's boundaries without shrinking your own needs. And sometimes, people only recognize your value once they no longer control your availability. But healing isn't about making them regret losing you. It's about building a life that no longer depends on whether they finally realize your worth. Because the quietest victories usually matter most. The day you stop chasing. The day you stop hoping. The day you finally understand that being loved halfway